comment on, see, Board of Directors at watertransit.org. If you're unable to send an email, you will be given an opportunity to speak on the item after those who have signed up. So thank you all. And again, it's great to be here in incredibly beautiful, amazing Alameda, the hub of our system. And with that, I'd like to invite a dear friend and longtime supporter of our ferry operations in this city, the city manager of Alameda, Jennifer Ott, to say some words of welcome.
Thank you, Chair and board members. Jennifer Ott, City Manager. Really glad to have you here. I think it's a great idea to bring your meetings to the communities that you serve. So really excited to have that. And we are truly, as an island, dependent on you. We love your services. You're probably the only, public agency that we only hear positive things about, where we hear our residents love the ferry. And we are so glad to have you as a partner. And as some of you know, I used to, before being a city manager, was the transportation planning director along with the base reuse director. And so would often come to your meetings and talk, and had great partnership and still have great partnership, but know your staff really well and just have enjoyed working with them, very collaborative, and we appreciate all that. I also just want to highlight, I know that you know this, but just because I think it's exciting for the public to know too, of some of the projects that we're coordinating on and how successful that they are and have been. Obviously, you're going to hear more. I saw on your agenda about the water shuttle, but as just to point out in your agenda that we've had, over 50,000 riders on the water shuttle to date, which is just amazing. I think we kind of knew in our hearts that it would be successful, but I don't know that we knew that it would be that successful. So we're really excited, and we're working with some of the regional agencies to really try to expand service and to do what we can to continue to make that a successful endeavor. We also are thrilled that we've hit the $1 million, I wish $1 million, but 1 million riders on Seaplane Lagoon. And so that's really exciting. That was something I was involved in as the base reuse director, getting the funding and trying to make that happen. And I think it kind of unlocks the base, and to be able to create a regional housing and employment hub is really dependent on your service and that Lagoon ferry. So to have been able to hit that 1 million rider mark is just unbelievable. And we're so glad for your partnership on that. And that was something I worked on with your staff. It was a lot of work, and it was complicated, and many of you as well. And so thank you so much for that. A little less exciting, but also probably bread and butter, super important, is just how we deal with parking in the land side and how we coordinate on that as a city and a transit agency. So just acknowledging, I know there's some information in your executive director report about that, but just making sure the parking works, how we do that, making sure we don't impact ridership. And we also want to make sure that our riders are safe. So we know there's some issues there that we're collaborating on, and really appreciate your staff's partnership on that. And I know we're working through all of those issues together. And then lastly, just really excited about your effort to electrify. Just it's something sustainability is something we take very seriously here. And the fact that that you'll be connecting to Alameda Municipal Power's 100% clean energy with you electrifying. It's another example of, I think, 2 public agencies leaning in the area of sustainability. So really excited. We want to be a partner on that and help you facilitate the electrification of your fleet and your terminals. So thank you for coming here and being here. I'm in a retreat, so that's why I can't stay for the whole meeting. So I apologize that I will be leaving, but thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. We've appreciated having the opportunity to work with you in different roles and tranches at different times. And I remember, it must have been 4 years ago or so, coming out to the event for the opening of the Seaplane Lagoon. And, we were like, smack in the heart of the pandemic, and wondering, how is this going to go? Are we going to be able to attract passengers to this? Because, the destination wasn't really in demand and all of that. But everyone was, had put in a lot of work on it, and it was a really great exercise in collaboration and, getting something to happen that we sort of knew needed to happen, but it wasn't easy to do. And, now we've sort of proven the case for that route and more. So that's exciting. And I think we've all been moved by the the Alameda shuttle. I like watching it come in and out at Jack London, just seeing the people get on and the bikes getting on and off. And it's another example of, coming together. And, it's one of the things about operating this service and this agency that is always reinforced is how much of a partnership it takes. We don't do anything well by ourselves. We do things really well when people do them with us. And some of the items that we'll talk about today will exemplify that. But again, Alameda is such a special place, and I know highly dependent on water transit, and we really value the relationship we have with you and the mayor and the leaders on the council and the community. And so it's great to be back here again. I think we did this a few years ago, and we'll be back again. So thank you very much. We'll let you get back to your retreat when you want to go, but appreciate your welcoming us today. I don't have too much more to add in the report. Same as I said last month. It's good to see the ridership solid. It's evidenced, by as we've seen in the reports, very, very strong, relatively strong compared to other agencies, and it really portends well for the future as we consider changing, adding services, and doing those kinds of things. So that's really great. I had a meeting with the new director of San Francisco Airport, Mike Cornett. Ivar Satero retired, and so Mike is the new SFO director. And we talked about the possibility of if it was possible, and I think it's only possible to think about a terminal south of SFO where ferry service could become a mainstay transit mechanism for getting people to the busiest airport certainly we have in the region. If that were the case, it would have a huge impact on removing cars from the road and making people's travel to their flights much more pleasant. So I don't know that that's possible, but Director Murphy, we talked about setting up a meeting of folks and planning staffs and so forth to see if the obvious challenges that would have in trying to do that could be overcome, and if there was a financial path to doing this and so forth. But the airport is such a big part of the region's economy. So is Oakland Airport, and to be able to provide better ways for people to get there is always one of the biggest challenges that airports have. So the more you can provide, great mass transit opportunities, by far the better. So hopefully we can work on that. And with that, again, great to be in Alameda. I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Monique Moyer.
Great, thank you. I just want to add my thanks to those that have already been mentioned, to the city of Alameda for hosting us, and to all the staff, both at WETA and the city, that have gone to the effort to host us. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's really delightful to be here. I love city halls, and this is a really nice one. So thank you for that, and appreciate that we are rotating around the bay. And this is one of not my favorite, but my second favorite inlets of the bay. So thanks, that's awesome. I also want to mention that the work that all of you have been doing for the last couple of years is really going to be tested, and we're right at a really important inflection point now, as particularly as the economy is changing, but also as the landscape for office workers is changing, particularly in the Bay Area. And it's not changed yet, but you can feel it. We see it a little bit in our ridership numbers. So you can definitely see it if you spend any time in any of the recreational areas or the cities on the weekends and at certain points. I suspect we're going to see it a lot more now that it's lighter at night on the weekdays after hours. So I just want to point out that I feel like the work that's been done has readied us maybe better than some of the other agencies to pick up where we left off, if we haven't already, which I would argue that we have already, and carry that forward. And it's going to be really critical to the success of our region. So I wanted to say thank you for that effort. Thank you for having that foresight and for that staying power. And I want to commend all of us on the board for supporting that effort.
Thank you. Director Alba.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to be here in Alameda. And I don't have a lot of updates today. It's wonderful to see the ridership updates every month and seeing how steady we are and with a continued growth. And it was also wonderful to see Caltrain's ridership hitting over 50% for the first time since the pandemic started. And as wearing my regional transportation planner hat, all we can do is continue to work on all of these initiatives that are near and dear to our hearts and continue pushing forward and recognize San Francisco Bay Ferry's growing staff and how wonderful of a job everyone is doing in adding all of these new employees and how well they fit into the structure. And I continue to be in awe of this organization and all of the work, the hard work that you're doing, especially under the current circumstances with changing directions and policies and grant opportunities. And so just keep doing what you're doing, heads down, and we will come out on top.
Love your optimism. It's always compelling. Director Delvano.
I don't have much to add except that this is my first meeting since the beginning of the year because I was abroad. But I've been keeping up, just looking at the packets, keeping updated with information. A few conversations with Seamus. I know everybody's doing good here. So I guess Happy New Year because I didn't get to say that to anybody.
Thank you. And we always miss you. Of course, the meetings go very smoothly and it's great. Yeah. But we need you here. Director Du, please.
Yeah, I echo the gratitude for having us here today. It is a lovely chambers, and I'm grateful for that opportunity to rotate around our service areas. And as we see the return to work movement happening, I am watching very closely how things are happening in Solano County in that region, especially with Highway 37 and the tolling that is being proposed that will be coming, and the connectivity to San Francisco, to our system with the rest of that region. It's a little bit challenging to get to the ferry for the rest of Solano County. So
Yeah. I think Solano County has an increasingly important role to play in the region's future, it would seem.
Yes.
Comes up a lot. So a lot of opportunity there. Let me turn over to our executive director, Mr. Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wunderman. Thanks for those comments about the work that staff is doing. Really appreciate Jennifer Ott's comments about the partnership with Alameda. The city staff here is great to work with. We are busy with a number of issues. I think she summarized maybe 80% of our agenda just in her brief comments here. A lot of exciting things happening with the agency in general, the service in general, and a lot of them are going to make service to Alameda better. So we'll talk more about that later in the agenda. I do want to take an opportunity to introduce the newest San Francisco Bay Ferry staff member, Tio Saraji is here. They are our new digital communications specialist. They will work on Alexis Matsui's team. Alexis had that position before she took the role of manager of public information and marketing. And Tio has just a long list of experiences working in strategic communications and digital storytelling, most recently with the Green Lining Institute, Bike East Bay, Equal Rights Advocates, some organizations that are near and dear to our hearts and that we work closely with. So look forward, Tio, to you joining the team and working with us to do some great things in the marketing and especially digital communications world. With that, I'll get to some of the reports of the staff. First, I want to welcome Mike, I think, is going to give us an update on the Alameda Ferry Terminal access work that's happening.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Alameda. Personally love the commute getting here. I live right down the block. I'm really excited to be in this community. It's so important to what WETA does. We have 3 services that we operate here, and they're longstanding, very successful services. So this is an opportunity to give an update on some of the issues we're working through that relate to terminal access at our Alameda terminals. And we've been working very closely with city staff. As Jen mentioned, we have a really great working relationship. And in particular, I want to acknowledge and introduce Lisa Foster and Brian McGuire, who are with us today. We'd probably have several more staff here that we work with, but they're off in a retreat somewhere in Hawaii, I've heard. So there are various initiatives that we're coordinating with city staff on that relate to terminal access. A lot of these kind of were issues that we began coordinating on pre-pandemic. And so there have been kind of starts and stops as we've gone along. But things are kind of coming to a head right now, and we're really working collaboratively again with the city to comprehensively address all these issues. And they relate to parking fees, which, as Jen alluded to earlier, the city has policy and the rights to implement at our terminal under certain conditions. We're working on the need for security at the terminals, and then there are also provisions that are concurrent with the transfer of maintenance responsibilities on the land side of our terminals. To allow the city to reclaim certain local subsidies that go to the terminals. And so our goal at San Francisco Bay Ferry is to make sure this is all done in a way that benefits the services as well as the riders. And our specific interest in something that the city has been very open-minded to working with us on is as they go forward with plans to implement parking fees, that those are done in a way, again, that benefit the service and benefit our riders. And it's really a great time to begin looking at this on the city's behalf. And this is their initiative. What we're seeing at the Seaplane Lagoon Terminal and the Harbor Bay Terminal is that ridership growth continues to go month by month. And we're seeing those lots consistently fill up Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And so the city has a plan and that we're working with them to kind of fine tune to begin implementing fees on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at the Harbor Bay Terminal as early as mid-April, late April. So the duration, the days of the week that they're doing match well to the days that the parking lots are actually filling up. Doing it at one terminal initially instead of both terminals gives us an opportunity to make sure this works in the way that we're intending it to, that there's no kind of negative externality that comes along that we're not anticipating. And allows the city to move forward with a policy goal of pricing parking at its transit facilities that's very important to the city. So a lot more, we're going to continue working together. I think the relationship of how all these issues come together is going to be spelled out in a memorandum of understanding, and we're currently working with the city to draft that and anticipate bringing that back to the board for your consideration as early as next month. Happy to take any questions on that or anything related to the Alameda terminal access issues.
Just a real quick on the parking. What would be the form of the parking management? What would the customer experience?
I introduced Lisa Foster for a reason.
Good afternoon, Chair Wonderman and directors. I'm Lisa Foster, Transportation Planning Manager for the City of Alameda. Thank you for that question. We are planning to launch paid parking with both pay stations that people can pay at and, excuse me, mobile payment options, both via text and via app. And we are planning to make it possible for people to get onto their boat, catch that ferry, and then pay when they're on the ferry so that you don't have to worry about waiting in line at a pay station.
You got the gist of my question. Director Alba?
I just love that you're implementing a 3-day fee. And I really appreciate that we're focusing on the days with high demand and not just doing something that may look like just a revenue generator, but rather something that is really intended to manage the parking demand. And then just a follow-up question, how often do you think you will be able to change the fee depending on demand?
The pricing strategy that our city council reviewed includes changing the rate based on demand no more often than quarterly, with at least 2 weeks' notice to the public, and incremental changes, no more than $1 a day per change.
Yeah.
I anticipate that it will be less than quarterly.
Yeah.
For all the reasons that we need time to take into account all our changes. And we're also working on the exact methodology for how we're going to collect data and look at seasonality for ferry ridership and make sure it all lines up.
Fantastic. It's like a playbook out of Professor Don Shoup's The High Cost of Free Parking. So I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director
On
Du?
that, actually, before you, so I just have a question on, so I'm curious if Alameda County has a first last mile program at all. For example, Solano County, if you're going to the ferry terminal, you can take Lyft and you get a discount through Solano Mobility to help, support that. And so I'm just wondering if there's anything like that here.
Yeah, with that program in Solano County is definitely on our radar. I'm not aware that there's a program in place in Alameda County or the city of Alameda for that matter. But it's definitely on our radar as a potential leader in the space of looking at innovative first last mile solutions. And I think it's one of the things that's going to fall under the purview of our pilot service program. And we've had, specifically looking at the type of thing that's been done in Solano County, using the terminal access plans that we're going to be developing, kind of pursuant to the terminal guidelines that the board adopted recently. We're going to be using those plans to identify future opportunities that could include extending that program or doing a version of it in Richmond, for instance, certainly looking at the terminals here in Alameda. I think a big factor and a reason we don't kind of have a universal approach is a lot of the opportunity is dictated by how open the local partner is to doing these things in their community. And so what works in a certain city in the Bay Area doesn't necessarily work for all cities. So if we were to do something like that in Alameda, we'd have to work really closely with our partners and make sure it's done in a way that meets their goals and priorities.
Yeah. Thank you.
Go ahead.
That's a really good question, Pippin. I'm also, that triggers the question, secure bike parking. Of course, we can bring our bikes onto the ferries, but if we want to encourage people to access the terminal by even more higher bike access, is there secure bike parking at the ferry terminals?
Yeah, and one of the dynamics in the terminal access issues we're working through is that responsibility for the landside maintenance and landside operation of the terminal has been transferred to the city. And this is in general kind of a model we just looking to replicate throughout the system, and certainly for new projects that go forward. To date, personally using the Alameda terminals, there is secure bike locker parking at each of the terminals. And as far as I understand, there's available capacity in those lockers. I think if they were to become fully subscribed, I would imagine we would be working in partnership with the city to identify funding opportunities to enhance the capacity.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Go ahead, back to Seamus.
Okay, great. So we wanted to invite Tim while he's making his way up here. I know Tim's going to introduce a few others on this next item. This is a little bit of a twofer because we have some really exciting news. First piece of news is that our CARB Alternative Control of Emissions Plan was accepted and approved by CARB. My first meeting, I think, when I joined San Francisco Bay Ferry was talking about what kind of a challenge it would be to ultimately comply with the CARB rules. And there were a lot of doubters, and understandably doubters at the time, because the zero emission vessel technology had just not progressed and evolved to the point where that technology would work for our system. It has now, and when it did, we jumped at the chance to develop a plan in collaboration with CARB that would meet CARB's emission reduction goals through an alternative compliance method that would have us going above and beyond what is actually required. And you know that as the REEF program. So very exciting news that the CARB plan has been adopted by their board. We've worked really collaboratively with their staff, and Tim's going to talk a little bit more about that. And the Carl is the first addition to our fleet that is a fully CARB compliant vessel. And Tim and the team will talk about what exactly that means.
Good afternoon, Chair Wonderman and members of the board. Tim Hannah, Director of Engineering and Project Delivery. Today, we are going to talk about the imminent delivery of the Carl, the final approval of the ACE plan, and our collaboration with CARB over the last several years, and also with so much focus on REEF, rightfully so, and our electrification program. What we've done to improve our emissions controls with our existing fleet and to future safe those vessels to make sure that we can provide the same robust and reliable service that we currently have today. As noted, the slide specifically says Carl delivery. It's imminent. The boat has been ready for a little over a month now, and we're waiting on a weather window to bring her down. Staff is getting updates every 3 days for potential weather windows. And so we're continuing to monitor that, and we're trying to get her here as soon as possible. How did we get here? Prior to COVID and the CHG CARB rulemaking, where were we at as an agency? We had just delivered the 3 Pyxis class vessels, which was a huge relief for our agency because we were maxing out ridership in Vallejo, and we desperately needed the 445 capacity vessels in that service. So we had just delivered those boats. Those were the first Tier 4 engines in the U.S. They were at that time they were in a test program, and just last year they were finally certified. But we had started a test program with EPA to certify those Tier 4 in conjunction working with CARB. They were MTU's first Tier 4 engines, and the 2 Dorado class vessels were under construction using the first EPA Tier 4 engines. Shortly after that, the CARB regulation came out. And so what did we do? What did we do as an agency with our current fleet, and what was our plan going into the future? And I'm going to introduce Christian Stark from Aurora Marine Design. He's the vice president to walk us through how we got to where we're at today.
Be advancing. Hello, Chair Wonderman, Board of Directors. Christian Stark, Vice President of Aurora Marine Design. Tim, there we go, explained where we were. At that point in time, 2019, we were the cleanest ferry service in the Bay, and we were feeling very good about ourselves. And then CARB in 2020 started the rulemaking process for the new commercial harbor craft rules. And that's where we really learned that EPA Tier 4 that we were in the process of implementing and certifying engines had done a lot and to address nitrous oxide emissions, but hadn't done enough to address particulate emissions. And the state of California said with the air requirements, that the air quality in the state, they needed to go further. And that's where the new commercial harbor craft regulations were coming in to address primarily diesel particulate emissions. So now that we had this new goal, we sort of looked through the fleet and what was available. And we realized that it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of capital expenditure to raise the fleet we had to be in compliance. Where there was limited Tier 4 engines available for the vessels that were not currently Tier 4 engines, because the industry itself was struggling to provide Tier 4 product at that time, much less talk about the next steps. For the engines that weren't Tier 4, there wasn't really, for the boats that weren't Tier 4, there wasn't space in the vessels for SCRs. And for the vessels that did have SCRs, since we were fortunate enough to be running vessels with SCRs, we didn't have space for DPFs because we hadn't looked that far in the future yet. So it was a very challenging problem we were handed, is how to comply and how to make this a positive and not just a huge capital expenditure. Because we had 3 boats just delivered and 2 under construction that were going to require a huge capital investment to try and make them in compliance. All right, next slide. All right, so how did we get there? Collaboration. So staff, San Francisco Bay Ferry staff, Aurora Marine Design, and CARB, we got together and sort of worked through the proposed rulemaking, trying to figure out what their goals were, where that might exist in the world, and how we could achieve these goals. I think there was a period of time for, or more than a year, maybe we were having weekly meetings on how this rule was going to take shape and how we could possibly address it. And through that, we identified some areas. We identified some equipment in Europe that was available or was going where CARB wanted it to go. And then we had identified some opportunities with electrification that we could possibly meet the goals without expending large capital dollars on brand new capital equipment we already had. So we've sort of developed this framework, and now we're at a point, next slide, where we kind of came up with a plan. We said, okay, so we sort of laid the groundwork for the REEF program. We didn't have that name at the time, but we said, okay, where we can, we're going to electrify vessels, new build and retrofit vessels, so we can overachieve where we can overachieve. We identified a very small niche of equipment that could be compliant reasonably, and we identified the vessels that we could use that equipment on to get in compliance. And then between those 2 items, that would allow us to make up for the large capital investments the agency had just made that would be too terribly painful to bring into compliance right now, and give time for technology to grow and for those implementations to be less painful. So that was sort of the framework of the plan that we put together and came up with. And then from there, we had to get with CARB and figure out how we would develop a regulatory framework that would make that an approved solution. And from here, there's Tracy Haynes from CARB is going to come and talk to you right now about that framework that they came up with, but we utilized. Tracy.
Let's see. Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Haynes. I'm a staff air pollution specialist at the Air Resources Board. I work on the teams that oversee the commercial harbor craft regulation and the ocean-going vessel regulations. And as Christian mentioned, our team and the WETA team have worked very closely in collaboration over the past years, and particularly over the past year or so to develop this alternative control of emissions plan. So the ACE plan is part of the amended regulation. The commercial harbor craft regulation was initially adopted in 2008. It was amended in 2022, as Christian mentioned, and this ACE plan compliance option is intended to provide an alternative pathway for fleets that want to meet the emission reduction requirements in a different way than the model year-based deadlines in the regulation. So generally, the regulation has model year-based compliance deadlines that require engines to turn over, the higher emitting engines earlier and the lower emitting engines later. The key characteristic of the ACE plan, or the key requirement, is that the emission reductions of nitrous oxide and particulate pollution under the ACE plan must be equivalent or greater than the emission reductions would be under just complying with the nominal deadlines. So that was a really big challenge. The team worked for months on an iterative process of putting together these complex calculations that met the requirements of the regulation. And our goal on the CARB side was we really wanted to make sure that that all of our staff's questions who were analyzing this proposal, were addressed, and that that ultimately we could get to a place where we could recommend approval ahead of going into this public process that the regulation requires. So, lot of credit to the teams for working in such close collaboration and making that happen. So let's see. So the ACE plan was approved, as Christian mentioned, March 7, 2025. So congratulations to the WETA team for all your work in getting this plan and implementing this plan. You know, we on the CARB staff know that there's just a ton of effort being put into this, and you know, really want to acknowledge that. It was a really big milestone also that this ACE plan is the first ACE plan approved under the commercial harbor craft regulation. So, and it significantly lowers NOx emissions further than would be lowered under the model year based schedule also. So it's really a win for public health, and we really appreciate WETA's approach to modernizing the fleet and the example and leadership that you're showing in the electrification space. And also want to highlight that the Carl is the first vessel that we're aware of on the CARB team to meet that most stringent standard of Tier 4 plus DPF operating in the state. So that's really an accomplishment as well. So turn it back to Christian.
We'll have a comment.
Thank you, Tracy.
Other than woohoo.
Yeah, that one?
Hmm?
No, that one.
Woohoo.
There you go. All right, so that was the ACE plan. And now we want to talk about that and then what the results of it were. But one thing I'd like to point out that Tracy mentioned, the complex calculations. It was quite a feat to figure out how to put the calculations together and then to make them flexible enough that it's something that the operation could use and have some room to operate in. We ended up coming in with a low use scenario and a high use scenario for everything we thought the agency might do for now until 2035, including future routes that could be out there, future vessels that could be out there. It was daunting. And I would like to thank Jan, staff member, who I got the ball rolling and got the framework figured out, and Jan carried it over the finish line because it was quite something. So the results of that are, there was two main goals of that. And you've been hearing a lot about the REEF program lately. That's one arm of the plan, and that's the 149 passenger vessels. You already seen that contract that got awarded. It's starting production engineering, and that program is up and running, moving. Universal charging float, which is how we're going to keep all these boats charged and running. That contract is out in the street right now, which should be coming to the board sometime in the near future. Something. And the 400 passenger, the large electric vessels, which you'll hear about later in this board meeting today. So that portion of the program is well underway. We are making progress, and we are getting to implementation on that, which is exciting. Okay. Yes. All right. So, nope, wrong direction. One of these days, I'm going to figure that thing out. I think I'm just leaving it in Tim's hands. Okay. All right. So the other side of that operation, so the non-reef side of it, is the engines. When this came up and we started to figure out how to comply with what CARB was looking for, we looked around the world for all the engines that were out there and all the different regulatory environments around the world and what people were doing. And we found a small niche in Europe that was essentially doing what CARB wanted. They were looking at it a different way, so it wasn't quite one for one, but it really was essentially achieving the same goal. And we found one engine that would work for us for under 1,450 horsepower. We found one engine with a San Francisco Bay Area staff and Aurora Marine. We went to that manufacturer. We talked to the factory in Germany. We said, hey, we think this is a viable solution for us. Can you add this horsepower level to what you're doing in Europe? And they agreed to add to their programs. We only found one person, and we had to get them to expand their program to make it work for us. And then we were eventually able to leverage that European certification for a US EPA certification. It took quite a long time, but we finally got there. And that was the only solution we really found out there that was feasible, viable, financially and space constraint wise. And so that's the vessels we're going to talk about in a second. And then over 1,450 horsepower, we were looking at third-party units, aftermarket add-ons to engines, and we had to put them in the wrong place because we couldn't violate the EPA delegated assembly, I think is the term they use. And there was a lot of risks involved because we had to get that equipment validated by CARB, which took 1,000 hours of running. We had to get manufacturers to agree with DPF manufacturers to agree with engine manufacturers, and we had to take on the risk of that not getting integrated properly, or if there was a problem, who was going to be at fault? Was it the thing connected to the engine, or was it the engine that caused the problem? So there was a lot of risks there. So next slide. So we took our one niche, and that was the arm of the ACE plan, and we applied it where we could. So right away, we had the 2 Dorado classes under construction with the 12V4000 MTUs, which we did not have a long-term solution for. We changed the next 2 boats to these MAN engines so that we could more easily comply, because we knew if at least we started with the base, we didn't have approval yet, so we couldn't put the right hardware in, but we had at least the base of that hardware. We started repowering the Gemini class because it was a direct fit for that with the Tier 4 version, because once again, we didn't have the DPF version of that certified yet by the EPA, so we couldn't install it, even though even if we could have bought it, they couldn't sold it, and we couldn't sell it in the United States. And very challenging, but we have the framework and the base set for it. And then in March 2022, we got the EPA, well, it wasn't in March of 2022, it was March 2022, Golden Gate Ferry, during their new build program, signed on to the same engines. And with that volume of equipment between San Francisco Bay Ferry and Golden Gate Ferry, we were able to convince the manufacturer to seek EPA certification of the package, because now we had enough volume to make it financially viable, and we got it done. So we were able to get grant funding from the community project funding request, championed by Congressman Garamendi. We were able to get funding in order to add that equipment to the Carl that was already under construction. Once again, we got the right engines in there, so the change from that engine to the DPF engine was not traumatic. Still cost some money, but it was not traumatic. So the frame and the groundwork we laid worked out well, and we are now getting the Carl delivered one of these days. So it's all worked out. That arm of the equation has worked out, and we're reaching the goals that we set out to achieve. Next slide. And then now Thomas Hall is going to talk about some of the improvements.
Hi there. Thomas Hall, Director of Operations and Customer Experience. So I'm going to talk about what the passengers will experience when Carl comes down here, when the weather clears in the Pacific Northwest. The key thing that we learned from Dorado and Delphinus over the past couple of years is that they really can cover every route in the system. That was what they were designed to do. Tim and his team designed and Aurora designed these vessels to be fast enough to cover Vallejo in an hour, tight enough to be able to be utilized at South San Francisco and Harbor Bay, and big enough to serve on all of our routes. We found that that was successful. We just ran numbers for operating hours for 2024, and Dorado served at least 8% of its hours on every route, split pretty evenly between the 6 routes that we run, which is a good testament to the fact that it works everywhere. There are a few things that we learned, especially with Dorado and Delphinus and Vallejo service, given that that's a unicorn route. It's quite a bit longer than any of our other routes. And very busy. It's a very high ridership route, especially on weekday commutes. And so some changes were able to be made to Carl and Zalathus, the 4th vessel in this class, that we're going to show real quick about improving the customer experience. So the first thing you'll notice on the left here, you have MV Dorado's second deck. It's all outdoor seating. We have improved some sheltering on some of those rows of seating, and plan to add some overhead heaters to make that a little better as well. But you see the big HVAC unit in the middle, just sort of breaks up the area. The design team did a great job of utilizing that space a little bit better on Carl and Zalathus. That's going to be a very popular bar area on summer evenings on the ferry and on weekends. So we're really looking forward to seeing how that's utilized by passengers. And then the other big improvement is an enclosed seating area on the second deck. So right now it's pretty open. The vinyl sheltering has improved the situation a lot in terms of wind shear up there on when it's really cooking at a fast speed headed up to Vallejo or from Vallejo down to San Francisco. We find that the enclosed seating with the slightly more comfortable seats will be very much appreciated. What we've seen when Dorado or Delphinus handles, especially a winter morning, high capacity, high passenger count Vallejo run, which I'm on quite a bit as my normal commute into the city. There's a little bit of groaning, if people have to sit upstairs, if we get a big load of passengers and some people have to sit upstairs, there's a little bit of groaning that it's not one of the Pyxis class vessels. And so to make these vessels truly flexible and so that we can use them on any route, this is going to help a lot. This adds about 50 seats of indoor comfortable seating that will be able to be climate controlled and folks will really enjoy. They'll be able to experience all the benefits of SF Bay Ferry even more. So we're really looking forward to rolling this out and testing it out on the Vallejo route. I'll be doing my little secret shopper, listening to what people say when Carl pulls up, and definitely go up there and sit with them until they start complaining, and then I'll disappear. But yeah, that's it for that.
All right, thanks, Tom. So next steps. We expect the delivery of the Zalphus, the fourth boat of the fleet, in the third quarter of 2025. We have the 400 PAX vessel construction contract award that will be presented to the board today. The universal charging float construction contract award that we anticipate bringing to the board in the next couple of months, and then continued implementation of the ACE plan. And that there's too much to list, so we called it implementation of the ACE plan. And so that's all the infrastructure work that we're currently working on that we'll be providing the board with routine updates on. So with that, I'd like to open it up for any questions you might have. There's no action on this item. It's just an info item.
Well, thank you. That's a lot of action for no action, and appreciate the challenge and the complexity of trying to fit those pieces together. And I remember being in a number of these conversations. I remember having a call with Mary Nichols when she was the chair of the car board, and trying to figure out how we could get sort of better positioned to be able to meet the criteria and understand what level of flexibility there might be and win some hearts and minds and things like that. But congratulations on the work that you all have done. It's a true benefit to our system and our community to have vessels who are the clean, when we can say we've got the cleanest vessels out there, no matter which category, and that we're just making them better all the time. And I think for the state of California to be able to say that they provided an organization like this, as described by City Manager Jennifer Ott as the agency everybody loves, to make it work. So thank you.
I don't even know where to start. CARB is a regulatory agency, right? And I think we all have had our fair share of work within regulatory frameworks. And I truly appreciate the flexible and collaborative approach that your team has taken on this project, or just in general. I just want to give you a ton of kudos for thinking outside the box and pushing the limits and figuring out an approach that works best for both the state and the agency under really challenging circumstances and within your own regulatory frameworks that you're working within. So I think that's wonderful. And to the project team in general, the creativity that has gone into this, and it's fantastic to see it. And I know that we're going to continue to have challenges, but these examples are such fantastic examples of how to work through issues and find a middle ground that works best for everyone. So just big kudos to all of you for working so hard on this.
Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge Lauren. She played a critical role in, our collaboration with CARB. And I mean, it was difficult to get through and it took a couple of years, but at the end of the day, this board and, CARB's goals are very much aligned. And it was just a matter of figuring out how we need to get there. And, we've worked with a lot of regulatory agencies and Tracy and her staff made themselves available. It became like, we can make a phone call and someone would pick up. And so it made the process, while it was difficult, it made it, we were able to get there because ultimately we both had the same goals. So.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I just want to piggyback on that as well and extend my thanks as well to the Air Resources Board for that pragmatism. As my colleague said there, that's not the norm. And so thank you. I remember the conversations we had a couple of years back when we were first, I think Seamus, you were saying you were first getting here. It seems like it was not that long ago, but so really gratifying to see the way that everybody came together. I can't imagine running those analyses out to 2035. Could you run some on the stock market too, please? That would be great.
Jan. Acknowledge Jan.
But thank you for all of that. It is really gratifying. And I just wanted to say, I will be in Seattle next week. If you'd like me to bring the Carl back, I'd be very happy.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful vessel.
I would suggest you check the weather first.
Yeah, I've checked the weather's not looking too good.
Excellent.
But in all seriousness, thank you very much. And I know it always takes everybody on the team.
Yeah,
and really appreciate, again, the heavy lift that's gone on. And this is another way that I feel like we're really ready for the next chapter, which is coming upon us very fast. And I appreciate the way that you've leaned into the lessons learned from the Dorado and the Delphinius and the subtle changes that have happened. So thank you. Looking forward to hearing the feedback. And I hope there's a day on the bay for the Air Resources Board, because there really should be.
Tom, I was just thinking, it's a complex story, and it's, those of us in the room, there's not that many of us who heard this, but it would be interesting. I don't know if it would be of interest to a journalist, but it's the kind of story that the public should be aware of what it takes to get from point A to point Z on a initiative like this, to actually be able to deliver what the public wants and what the government insists on and what is reasonable and rational. So I don't know if there's, a reporter, kind of a reporter, it's an in-depth kind of story and might be in a little bit in the weeds, but, it would be nice for the public to know what you did, so.
Yeah, point taken.
I'd like to say just one more thing, because I'm remiss because I didn't mention it. I'd like to thank Seamus, because actually, as you guys mentioned several times, this all sort of dropped in his lap as he started working here. And I don't think we would have been able to move it forward without his energy and enthusiasm and him coming from Caltrain and saying, well, we just elect Caltrain, this can be done. That I don't think we would have been able to really make the progress and get the speed at which we have done this without his leadership and his willingness and energy for this. He was a very integral part of this.
You're here. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Christian. Some people would say I just didn't know any better at the time. But it was a little bit of a gamble. It paid off. It is great to be able to sit in a room full of operators who are struggling to figure out how to comply with these rules, and they're very major challenges with complying when it comes to complying with these rules. But to be able to say that we have a team that made it happen is gratifying, and I think we have an obligation to make it happen too, as a operator with access to some of the grant funds that enable us to implement these technologies. We can set an example and hopefully eventually create some economies of scale that private operators will be able to benefit from. So that is what we're trying to do. Appreciate it.
That has actually happened, because Cal State Humboldt actually has a boat that's using the same engines we got certified. They actually got it delivered before we did, because it was a little more ocean going boat. They beat us a little bit because they were a little more robust for open ocean travel, but they are utilizing the package that we got certified so they could make it, so they could be compliant.
Awesome
to hear.
Great. Thank you so much.
Chair Wonderman, you have financial statements, legislative updates for both federal and state reports. Want to pause and see if there are any questions on those before we skip ahead to the ridership and reliability reports.
I just wanted to thank Aaron, although I don't think it was authored, but I think Aaron probably prepared the memo in front of the financials, which I requested, and it really helped set the framework for looking at them. So thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. Definitely well said. And in terms of the financials themselves, it sounds like we're on good footing for the year, and we don't have any big hurdles. So that sounds great. That's beside the. I think that's all I have. Other members, questions on any
I
of
just want
those?
to mention the addition of bar charts. But I don't really like the bridge toll bar chart. Can you change that one? The bridge toll one. Can you change the ratio?
You mean what it says? Not what it, yeah.
Data.
Yeah.
Is it? Oh, okay. Thank you. Consider it changed then. Thank you, Aaron.
Other comments or questions?
Yeah, I had the same question about the bridge toll. So if we don't see this leveling out the way it needs to, then let's discuss it.
Just to remind you, it doesn't play out equally throughout the fiscal year, right? So what we try to do is spend RM2 first, because that's use it or lose it. We also use our STA money first because that is also kind of use it or lose it. And then we try to hold the RM3 money to the very end, because if we don't use it, we can roll it over to the next year. And so it just shows up as being spent last.
Fantastic.
So it doesn't mean that we're not going to get the money we need to close the fiscal year. It just means we're spending it last. So
Right.
it's a little misleading, the bar chart. I really struggled with how to not alarm you, which apparently I still did, but yeah.
We know we're in safe hands with you.
Yeah, well.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. Every quarter she reminds us. Every quarter we forget. I do anyway.
Great. Then Gabe Chan for the ridership report.
Good afternoon, Board of Directors. Gabriel Chan, Transportation Planner here at WETA, and I am here to report another strong month of ridership, as usual. So some of the highlights that we saw this past month, we had over 180,000 total boardings, which was about 7% higher than we have projected in the budget, and 16% higher than the previous February in 2024. As noted on the slide, 92% of our pre-pandemic ridership showed up in February, and we continue to outperform the other regional operators. Of course, Director Alba mentioned the other regional operators are doing a little bit better. We're seeing an uptick in kind of the commute ridership, which is encouraging to see, and that's consistent across our system as well. And then, of course, of note, the Alameda Seaplane route carried its 1 millionth passenger, which was very exciting. And since we're in Alameda, I decided to throw in a couple nuggets of Alameda news. The ferry routes that serve the island make up about 57% of the total ridership in the system. Something of note, we really have a strong relationship with Alameda, and they're a very big part of our ridership base. And then, of course, the new Oakland Alameda Water Shuttle has been also very successful, and you'll hear more about that later in the meeting. So I want to kind of just run through the charts that we have enclosed in the report. One thing to note here is that with the kind of rebound in commute ridership, we're seeing that consistent across all of our routes, even South San Francisco. It's a tiny little uptick, but it's still there a little bit. And then the seaplane route of note here, if you see this chart across the entire life of the seaplane route, it has become our third most used regional ferry route, and it is the youngest of the system. So I really like this chart, the average daily ridership by month. We can see year over year how we're doing. And every year we're making good progress towards that 2019 number, that high watermark of the pre-pandemic ridership. Whether we hit that next year or not is still to be seen. Those numbers are going to come in with the next budget under development right now. If we look at the day of the week distribution, we're seeing the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays come out on top in terms of our commute ridership. Monday and Friday are looking a lot more similar to weekend days in terms of our ridership. That just goes to show that our weekends are really driving a lot of the ridership gains that we've seen in the past few years. This chart has remained pretty much unchanged since 2021. We still have those peaks in the commute time. They're not quite back to where they were in 2019, but the middays are a little bit more since we have a little bit more service at those times now. And then if we look at our performance compared to the budget, we're tracking pretty close to where we're projecting in the budget every year, maybe outperforming by a couple percentage points. But in general, we're tracking pretty close to what we've projected. And then this is the last chart that's enclosed in the report, just showing how well the system is doing overall compared to the other regional operators. Again, as BART and Caltrain start to get more riders that come back in the commute, we expect our system to recover some of those riders as well. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the positive news. And we hold you accountable for keeping it positive every month, forever. But we used to say that every month is the best month we've ever had. And so this is, I think we're getting back toward, may not be the best we've ever had, but it's better than the last month and it's getting back toward that trend. Any comments, Jeff?
I'm just, I don't know, I know you can't project ahead, but with the city having employees return to work, some of the businesses downtown, the state, employees returning back to work, are we starting to see the effect of that? Do we have any idea what that's going to look like? Or
I think it's still a little too soon to tell. I'm not going to make any wild predictions here, but we're definitely seeing the commute ridership tick up compared to previous years. Usually in the wintertime, it's a lot lower. And this year, we're just not seeing as much of a drop off as we have before. So, yeah.
Other thoughts, comments? All right, thanks, Gabe.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gabe. Then Tom, anything on reliability report?
Hi there, Tom Hall, Director of Operations and Customer Experience. I don't have much on reliability. The report is in there. I just want to note that one item in the upcoming April schedule change that we took that I'll be talking about a little later does directly address something that you would have seen in the January reliability for the Oakland Alameda route. Back in November, we tightened it up a little bit. We made a couple of changes to improve operational efficiency. And what we ended up doing is making the schedule a little bit too efficient to stay on reliably if there are slow bells in the estuary, and if ridership continued to be high and growing in the commute. And so we did have some on-time performance issues in January and again in February, and the data you'll see next month that we will address with the April schedule change. But that's the only note I had on that. Happy to answer any questions about reliability.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So I just was, as we were talking about ridership and how it drops during the bad weather months. And I kind of want to push back on that because when I was, I mean, I know the data is there, but maybe we do some sort of outreach or education, because the last time, the last board meeting we had rain happening and I took the ferry and it was a lovely ride still. And then I was contemplating the alternative of driving, and driving in the rain is so dangerous and so stressful. I would almost think that our ridership should be increasing in bad weather times, because it's a very lovely ride. It's very warm and convenient and comfortable, and so much less stressful and so much better for the environment. So I don't know how we can message that, but it feels like we should be trying to message that and really push that narrative that it's better on the ferry when we're having bad weather.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I feel the same way about, driving in the rain versus being on the ferry in the rain. I will say it's very route dependent. So Vallejo is the most resilient during rain. We don't notice a huge drop off. I think on that day the ferry was quite full despite the rain, because the only alternative really is either driving to a BART station, crossing a bridge, having to drive through a bunch of congestion, and then taking BART the rest of the way, or driving all the way in. And so the ferry is really a core option for folks in Solano and Napa counties. It's a little different in the other corridors we serve, where there are BART stations that are closer, in terms of waiting for your train versus waiting for your ferry to board in the first place. There's obviously a lot more shelter, especially at the underground BART stations, that we think is a difference. We've been thinking about this a lot, over the years. Before the pandemic, there was much less drop off during the rain. I think a lot of it is also people are able to stay and work from home if there's even a drop of rain in the forecast, which was not the case before the pandemic. And so I think a lot of the drop off is there as well. It'd be interesting to look at bridge toll data on those rainy days to see if that goes down significantly as well. That's something we can look at and review. In terms of, letting people know that the ferry is still a good option in the rain. We saw this when we launched Richmond in 2019. The first storm that came through, like half of our ridership disappeared. And so we made a concerted effort in our messaging to really highlight that the ferry still runs in the rain. It's safe, it's normal and everything. We made such a big deal of it that when we did have a storm come through that shut down all service for an afternoon, it kind of got thrown back in our face a little bit. So we're pretty careful about, rain is okay, high winds, stay glued to those alerts. We're also seeing, really high increases in the folks that are subscribing to our SMS and email alerts. Rafael Regan on our team manages that system, and we've seen pretty explosive growth in the number of people subscribed. And so people are at least aware that during inclement weather, the ferry service will still run. There may be disruptions, and there's a way to get information on that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
That concludes the executive director's report.
Great. Any other questions for Director Murphy? If not, let's thank you all and appreciate all the great comments, really uplifting. Let's go to the consent calendar. We've got 2 items, A and B. Anyone want to pull an item from that? Can I get a motion on the consent
I'll make
calendar?
a motion. Motion for consent.
We have a motion and we have a second. Can you call the roll, please? Yes?
Yes.
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 And Director Du.
Yes.
The item carries.
Thank you. Consent calendar passes. Item 7, approve actions relative to RFP 22-017, 400 passenger reef vessel procurement. Action item.
Good afternoon, Director Wonderman, Vice Chair Moyer, board members. I'm Jeff Powell, Senior Project Manager. I'm excited to bring you the 400 passenger vessel for consideration today. It's super fitting that we're here in Alameda today. I've heard a lot about the seaplane, and if approved, this project would be the first link from the seaplane to San Francisco with an all-electric, emissions-free vessel. 2021 keeps popping up. That's the year this seaplane opened. That's the year that the intended replacement was envisioned. It's the year I started with this organization also. Didn't realize that till just a minute ago. So how did we get here? And this is phase 2. This is the first step of phase 2 of our reef program. 2 months ago, you saw the first phase 1 for the small vessel procurement. So what we did is we went out for procurement with the requirements for a 400 passenger, 350 to 400 passenger vessel, approximately 140 foot long, 35 foot beam, 6 foot draft. We wanted to make sure it had bike capacity of 40 to 50 bikes. The speed needed to meet 24 to 26 knots, all electric, and the power requirements fell somewhere around 4 times 625 kilowatts. Now that is double what we have on the 150 because we're attempt to keep all things the same across vessel, reduces the type of parts we have in inventory, the type of maintenance is the same. So we're trying to make everything similar from vessel to vessel. This would meet a U.S. Coast Guard subchapter K requirement. And we released the RFP on July 5th of 2024. And relevant to the 150 was released a week after on July 12th. The pre-proposal conference was held on July 22nd, actually the same day we held the pre-proposal of the 150. And proposals were due, this is where the differences came in, proposals were due October 7th, which gave bidders a little bit more time for putting together this proposal. The package that went out was slightly different than the 150. The 150, we went out with a 95% design. This one was a design build. So basically we told everybody what we want. You tell us what you can build for us. And it was well received with good participation. We had industry days, we had pre-proposal conference. We had a good attendance there. We did receive 2 proposals back. And there's a reason we believe we didn't receive more is because these vessels become more niche, more specific, more detailed required. And the amount of shipyards as you start getting more complicated vessels like this, the gene pool for the shipyards that are able to bid on these projects start to dwindle. In addition to some of the people didn't bid because of financial capacities, lack of bonding, which our bonding rates are rather low compared to other people in the industry. There's some technology risk there, and then size of the vessels and actually shipyard capacity. So we feel it was received well by industry, and we felt these proposals were really strong. Nichols Brothers submitted a very, very well put together proposal. Their price was a little bit higher than Hornblower, but at the end of the day, we go for a price and best value for the project. A little bit about Nichols. They're located in Washington. Unfortunately, they're not in the Bay Area. They have a 19-acre facility. They've been in business for several years, actually 43 years since 1982. They do have a history of working with San Francisco Bay Fair and repowering a lot of our vessels and a lot of work that's done on other vessels previously. They have extensive warehouse, pipe shop, electrical shop, machine shop, fabrication, fully suited to take on this task. And I'd like to recognize that with us today is Gavin Higgins, CEO, and Lacey Green, Vice President, here in the audience today. So what their proposal looked like, really close to what we asked for. 400 passengers, 142-foot length, 139 at the waterline, 34.9 beam, draft 6'3", all the characteristics that we were looking at in the vessel, they came pretty close to it. Some concept GA drawings, these are as we're negotiating right now. These aren't final. We will still go through some drawing reviews of these, but this is the main deck arrangement. We did achieve the 400 passengers. We have allocated 60 bikes on this drawing, more than what we originally put out, which is extremely important for this Alameda region. The upper deck, similar to some of the vessels we have in class, like our Pyxis class, enough seating for approximately 200 people on the upper deck. We got some flex spaces in there that we can adjust and make whatever we want. Again, these drawings are not final. They're still have to go through an approval process. Now the fun part. We came to you before and we told you that there's been some volatility in the shipbuilding industry since about 2022. We've seen that, we recognize that, and we acknowledge that. It's not great news for us, but we're making strides to get over it. So where did these vessels come at in price? As I mentioned, this was envisioned in 2021 when we first came up with some cost estimates to do this. And to put it in perspective, the vessel construction costs for 2 vessels that we're recommending today is $59.75 million compared to $41.45 million that we estimated back in 2021. That was roughly a 43.7% increase. Total program, including construction taxes, staff labor, construction management, contingencies, all that amounts to about $77.34 million, which is also an item for approval here, and compared to our 2021 estimates of $52.95 million, or roughly a 46% increase in cost. And performing the vessel analysis and proved that the price was fair and reasonable, we dug back to how we did the 150 and we related back to the very confusing topic of price per passenger, or price per seat. Now the 400 passenger does gain some economies of scale because it's now 400 boats. It's easy to add 1 seat, but eventually once you start adding so many seats, the vessel itself has to get bigger. So the price came in about $74,000 per seat compared to some of the other vessels that came in at around 100 per seat. We do have documentation in the folder that says, we believe the price is fair and reasonable. With that, our recommendation today is to award Nickel Brothers Boat Builders the contract for the construction of these two 400-passenger all-electric vessels. And with that, I'd like to ask if you have any questions.
Thank you. I'll keep my wallet in my jacket. Well, first of all, congratulations, although we didn't vote yet, to Nichols Brothers for bidding and, to start with 25 interested parties and get down to 2. I think it does say a lot about the complexity of the job and the risk that folks see in taking on these jobs and the markets and all of those things. So I think we appreciate the fact that Nichols bid, and it's obviously a very impressive company, and their capabilities, I think, are not in question. I think the hard part is the pricing and seeing that chart. It's not shocking because it's everything, and I think it's really making our society a little crazy. Understandably so, when we go, from going to the supermarket to everything else that we do, and just seeing, how much it costs to buy a carton of eggs if you can get them, and all those things. So that's the world we live in, and we need to keep living in the world. And I don't think it's the stuff of saying, well, it's just gotten so expensive, let's stop. The question I have is, given the given the uncertainties that exist these days, which are profound in the marketplace, especially with the tariffs, and especially around aluminum and steel and important materials that are going to go into these vessels. How is this contract structured to handle volatility? Because once we go forward, we want to have a timeline and actually get these vessels. And I think we probably also want to make sure the costs are under control, and that we don't come back and get another presentation says, well, remember what we told you a couple of years ago, now it's something else because of something else. But just interesting to know how you handle that, and I guess the risk factors that are obviously in place these days.
Yeah, great question. So tariffs, let's just address that one right on. That's something every meeting we go to, we talk about what are the risks, what are the costs, what are the tariffs. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of it we don't know, but here's what we do know. We do know that, tariffs is a real thing. If a tariff is in place, then that does trigger a change of law in our contract, which we do have some stake in the game for, right? In the construction cost of these vessels is $59.75 million. Of those 2 vessels, approximately 3.5% of that maybe is aluminum products. And that relates to about $1 million. And I'm not exact sure on the numbers, but pretty close, $1 million. So if a 25% tariff were imposed on $1 million, we could be coming to the table and discussing what we're going to do about the $250,000 per vessel. If we do have negotiations going, if that does happen, that would be a pass-through cost. It wouldn't be something that they would give us and say, hey, we're going to mark it up another 25%. We would make that a pass-through cost. So that is a realization. We do have a small contingency in the budget that may cover something like that may fall under the executive director's authority, or unfortunately, we may be back here discussing it with you if we have to do something more drastic.
Yeah, 250 is kind of the magic number.
That's 25%. And again, I'm rounding numbers, totally rounding, just off the top of my head.
Other, cost risk factors that you see going into this?
Risk factors?
Yeah, that could drive, that would also be kind of force majeure that would drive the price up more.
Man, if I had that crystal ball, I wouldn't be right here. There's inherent risk in every project we've done in the world, and we mitigate those risks based on what we know about projects, and we have procedures to address those risks and track them. The risks that we know about, aside from tariffs, I think are pretty low as far as project costs. Wouldn't be anything out of the normal for a project.
Let me I might have another question, but I'll go to the panel. Other directors, comments, questions?
Yeah, I have a similar question. So you said you have a small contingency budget. How how small? Or do we want to?
So the delta between about the $60 million contract amount to 77 million, so including in that number is not, is contingency. Contingency in there, but the largest part of that is taxes. You know, there's a 9.75 or 10 something % tax on the vessel delivered to Alameda. So there will be taxes in there, there will be contingency, there will be staff labor, legal costs, legal fees, construction management costs. That's all bundled in there. I don't have those exact numbers in front of me, but I'd be glad to provide them to you.
Tim?
Of course, he's going to bring it up here.
Now you have them.
Make sure I'm looking at the right one. So it looks like in the contingency, looks like we have about 3 million for the internally and 2.8 million in the second vessel.
So that's about 10%?
About 10%. That would cover routine change orders that we would see in normal projects going along. You know, if the tariffs were to impose right then and there, you know, we would eat up a large chunk of that, which we typically don't like to see eaten up in the very beginning of a project.
And then I think this might be a question for Aaron. I don't know. How are we doing this financially? Like, how does this impact our ability to do other things over the next 5-10 years?
Aaron's gonna come up and give us more detail on that, please do. But I just was gonna say that was a key part of our decision-making process to recommend 2 vessels instead of 3. Our RM3 funding is scarce, it's limited. We're not gonna increase it. It's a $300 million amount and we need to make it stretch as far as we can. The 150 passenger award that you made a couple of months ago, it's critical that we have those vessels available to serve these shorter routes that are serving the fastest growing neighborhoods and communities in the Bay. We need to be a part of the transportation solution to those areas as soon as we possibly can, and they have to be zero emission vessels serving those areas. These vessels are a part of our future. It's not quite as urgent that we move so aggressively to convert the rest of our fleet operating our central bay services to zero emission. And so rather than invest 33 million in RM3 funding to procure 3 vessels, we decided to invest 8.3 million in RM3 funding so that we can procure 2. So we thought that was the right call to make given the scarce availability of those matching funds. Aaron, please feel free to add more flavor to that.
I think that pretty much sums it up. We delayed the replacement of the Mare Island basically in order to make these other 2 vessels happen. The RM3 funding is needed to match the EP to make the EPA vessel complete. And in terms of risk, we have risk around the EPA funding. We're sort of inching our way towards how to deal with that situation. And we're working closely with the Port of San Francisco through whom those funds flow because they are the actual holder of the EPA grant. We're a subrecipient through them. So that's just the other thing that we're challenged by, but we're hoping to work through all those because this is an executed grant. We do have access to those funds. So it's a challenge, but those are the compromises we made given the conditions that we're in.
Let me think if there was anything else. I think I'll hold off for now.
Director Moore, you have
Aaron. Where are you hiding? I have a few things. Thank you. And I wanted to build on that theme, Aaron, that you were talking about with Director Alba. So I want to say a couple things. First and foremost, I did appreciate the quality of the staff report because it laid out that strategic analysis and hinted at other scenario planning that you did. And I do think that we put a lot of time and thought and energy into a long-range strategic plan, and long range means long range. That said, I don't want to, find out that we were buying at the top of the market in this particular moment in time. It's hard to know if this particular moment in time is a moment or an era. So Aaron, my question for you is, as I read the staff report and to the point you were just making, we've got about 42% of the funds are coming from the FTA, another 36% are coming from the ETA, and then the balance are coming from the, from the STA, the RM1 and the RM3. And so that gave me a lot of comfort back to the question that Director Alba asked and Director answered. The way that, help me to understand, but the way that the resolution is written, there's nothing, what the board is approving is the capped amount of the 77.3 million. And so what I would want is some sort of something that should the amount of RM3 monies need to be tapped to get to that 77.3, because right now it's about 8.3 million, as you said. Like, could we come back? Could we have a say in that so that if it starts to eke, I'll just make up a number, above 10 million, could we have another chance to decide that's really how we want to spend the money? So what I guess let me ask my question a little bit better. The way I read the resolution, we're approving the 77.3 million, not the buckets. So the buckets are fungible. The funding buckets are fungible.
I would say the buckets are not fungible. This is the funding plan for those two vessels, and we plan to come back to you within a month for the RM3 allocation because we're awarding the contract now. Notice to proceed hasn't, would not be given until the contract was completely executed, and we were sure we had all the funding buckets in place because it's, you wouldn't want to give notice to proceed to a contractor unless you knew you had confidence that you were going to have the funding.
Yeah, I get that part. But what happens if, say, a year from now, the EPA monies are gone or the EPA monies are half?
Sure.
And then
Yes,
the way
that's
I
correct.
read it, you, the staff, have the authority to draw more from RM3.
Yes.
That's the part I'm having
We have the authority to
discomfort
come
with.
back to you for more RM3 should you choose to allow us to, allocate more funds that way. We also have in the contract, I would refer to legal, but we do have the ability to cancel the contract with negotiations about expenses to date we're still liable for that. Is that a correct statement?
I mean, the contract has termination provisions. I hate to even acknowledge that publicly, but I mean, I think the answer to your question is that you're authorizing a contract award, which will incur some obligations that will be hard to undo. But in terms of the budgetary buckets, while you are approving buckets now, they're your buckets, and you could change the buckets in the future if you so decide. Right? I mean,
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Would it come back?
Right now, that feels like it's delegated to staff. So what's to
I
prevent
don't-
staff from putting 28 million into RM3? Does that have to come to us for approval? That's my question. I'm not asking about the contract with Nichols. I'm asking about the budget.
Yeah, so I think we want to allocate more funding to the project to replace other components of the funding plan that disappeared for some reason. We would need to come to the board to get them authorization for that allocation, right?
Yes, that's correct. So
Okay.
all RM3 allocations have to come to this board, and we haven't brought the 8 million to you.
Yeah, that part I
We will bring that
recognize.
to you. I will say the FTA funds were included in the current year budget for the Mare Island and the Intently projects. So that is an executed grant already that we are just shifting to the one vessel. So the federal participation is already available in grants that we wouldn't want to mess with, because the minute you mess with the grant,
We have
right?
the cash.
The
Do we have the
cash.
money?
We
actually
do have access to our cash.
Okay,
The
awesome.
FTA cash is flowing. There doesn't seem to be, and particularly for this is in the repair and replacement program, which doesn't seem to be a target of the administration. But I mean, this is a kind of a crazy world.
It's
we're
new
living in.
territory.
It's new territory that we are all navigating, but we are constantly testing the system, and we are still getting drawdowns. And to the extent there are staff to execute grants, they are working on them at the FTA. So the FTA money is working as we need it to right now. And the EPA money is working as well. It's just that seems to be more of a target right now for the administration.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah.
May I ask the Nichols folks a couple of questions since you've made the trek?
Gavin, CEO of Nick Brothers.
How do you do?
Thank you for coming.
Welcome.
So first and foremost, thank you for bidding. Thank you for being our partner. Why did you want to do that?
We're shipbuilders. This is what we do. We are always developing the opportunities that we're building in. We are additionally bidding on building the Washington State ferries. So we just delivered to the Navy a 185-foot steel, fully autonomous hybrid vessel.
Cool.
Will operate 360 days a year without support. So we do build extraordinary vessels. And we have built a lot of boats for San Francisco. And this is a continuation of that business.
Fantastic. Forgive my ignorance. I don't know enough about your shipyard, but for these two vessels, would you do them consecutively or simultaneously, or how do you envision?
You start one, and then you approximately 6 months after the first one, we start the second one. So they're delivered approximately 6 months apart.
Fantastic. And do you foresee, back to the questions that we asked staff, do you foresee anything that is a tremendous risk besides the ones we've already talked about?
No, I mean, technically, we don't see this as a highly risky project. We think you've picked a very good propulsion supplier. We have worked with a very strong naval architect who has a lot of experience in building this type of vessel, particularly electric ferries of this size. So we have worked to minimize the risk because we're shipbuilders, we're not risk takers.
I like the way you said that. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that we should know? Don't lead him
No.
with that from the lawyer of all people.
No, those are all good questions.
Good. You sure?
Yep.
It was a laugh of appreciation.
The lawyer laughed. Now he's not going to answer. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for making the trek.
Well,
I don't think you're done though.
Yeah.
okay.
A very quick question. Yeah, thank you so much for being here today. I did see here in one of the sentences that vessel 1 is predicted to be delivered in Q4 2026 and vessel 2 in Q1 2027. So that could be 6 months if we think, the first day of the quarter in 2020 or the fourth quarter in 2026 and the last day of the quarter in 2027. Is that kind of the schedule you're thinking, or would staff recommend shifting the second delivery date slightly, or is it contingent on getting these ferries in service by a certain date?
It is not contingent on getting the ferries in service by a certain date. We would, of course, like the project to be delivered as quickly as possible to realize the benefit as quickly as possible, but it's not critical from a schedule standpoint.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're being realistic by putting them just 1 quarter apart when the construction schedule is 6 months apart. Yeah, that's just a minor thing. And then just as a side note, coming back to Caltrain and it's not ferry. It's a big intersection that needs to be retrofitted in Burlingame. There was a funding estimate back in 2022 that came in, and they've updated Caltrain and their contractors have updated that estimate and come in at more than 100% above the 2022 estimate. And so we see these massive impacts on our infrastructure projects. And I think it's just something we're going to have to live with. We just need to make sure that we have the funding to do it. But I'm all in. I can't wait to see these ferries in service in just a couple of years.
Thank you.
So I just had a question on, as we have seen the costs increase in the shipbuilding industry over the last several years, are there new technologies or new developments that are happening or that you guys are participating in to try to contain costs and stabilize costs going forward?
Well, we have a continuous training program for our staff. We are a state-approved, we run a state-approved apprenticeship program. So like all companies, we have attrition, people leave, they retire. We actually have a declining age of our workforce with, well, our numbers are going up, or actually have a declining age because we work hard in the apprenticeship training and bringing younger people on board. Workforce development is a huge challenge, of course, with growth, but yeah, that's one of the things we're doing. We invest with the type of vessels we're building, as I talked about earlier. The autonomous vessel taught us a lot, and that staff then goes and applies those skills and development into the next vessel. And we work to train our staff and then develop our staff and bring on more, more knowledgeable staff and just continue to grow the company that way.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. And I appreciated the strategy that was in the staff report that identified, that we're going to pause on MV Mare Island to accomplish this. And the question on the contingency, I was thinking there was a 10%, so that was good to hear that there is that 10% contingency. And I appreciate the efforts you are doing to control and contain costs and invest in the workforce future. Thank you.
Okay, hearing no more comments from the board, do we have a motion to go through with this transaction?
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
And we have a second. Are there members of the public who would like to, who are signed up to testify on item 7?
Nobody has signed up to speak.
I can't see folks raise hands on Zoom, so anyone either here in the room or in Zoom world wish to testify?
Those are on Zoom are free to unmute themselves.
I'm sorry, couldn't hear you.
Oh, those on Zoom can unmute themselves if they want to speak.
Okay, other comments we have a motion and a second.
Just a quick question about the DBE participation. So, but as we know, it's really hard to get the DBE participation up. Assuming we have a successful voting here in a little bit, if you have subcontractors that are interested in or able to become California certified for DBE, that would be fantastic. I know that's hard after the fact, but whatever you can do to bring it up to the roughly 1.8% would be, or 1.7% would be fantastic. I really appreciate the little, the step we're making towards the DBE participation. Would love to see it a little bit higher.
I think my only comment is, well, a couple, but I hope we're buying at the top right now, because if it goes any higher, I don't know what we're going to do. But I didn't know we were supposed to hate the Canadians either. So this is all new territory for me. But I don't want you to do it now, but I'm definitely interested in hearing about your apprenticeship program, because I think that's one of the things that I've heard, not just in your industry, but other industries, about being able to really blue collar industries where apprenticeship is important, and having people come up and being able to learn the trade that's out there. I know we visited a shipyard up in Washington a few months ago, and that was a big issue up there. So I'm sure I'm kind of curious to hear off time about how you guys have overcome that and how it's working out for you. So thanks.
Director Del Bono just reminded me that we had a great experience at Maverick Marine, where we invited the crews, our represented crews from International Boatmen's Union up to inform some of the design decisions along the way on the vessel, because they're ultimately some of the end users of the vessel. They have a good understanding of what works and what doesn't, and they gave us great advice that turned into actual design decisions on those vessels. I think we would like to do the same thing as a part of this contract, so want to make sure that is something we can do.
We always view construction as a team effort. Shipyard has their part, naval architect has their part, the owner has their part. Everybody's opinions are, are shared. Plans are put forwards, the plans are reviewed. We take all the comments back, but then through construction, we know things come up. So we're always interested in hearing and supporting your, the opportunity to put that into action.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If there's no public comment, let's call the roll.
Chair Wonderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director Del Bono,
Yes.
and Director Du.
Yes.
The item passes.
Okay, let's build a boat.
Dang, I just want to acknowledge, a lot of people I didn't recognize in here. Seamus has been supportive of us, Tim, the whole staff, and another one I didn't recognize who made a long trip was Jim Towers, who is our CM of record with Ellie Bay Design Group, is in here with us today. So
thank you.
Just want to recognize him. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you very much. Okay.
If I could I just thank you all, Chairman Wonderman, the board and the directors. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It means a lot to Nichols Brothers to continue to be building vessels for San Francisco, particularly for WETA as well. So, I just do want to thank you for this. It means a lot to us. So thank you very much.
If the cost of the aluminum is too high and you're close to Canada, you can just go straight there and get it.
We have sources.
Oh, gosh.
Thank you for coming today. We appreciate you. Thank you. Okay, item number 8, Mission Bay Ferry Landing Memorandum of Understanding. How long have we been working on this project? Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Takes a while in this business, it's a patient person's business.
2020.
Thank you, Chair Wonderman, Vice Chair Moyer, and Board of Directors. Chad Mason, Capital Planning Manager with WETA. This is item 8, authorize Executive Director to execute a memorandum of understanding with the Port of San Francisco for the Mission Bay Ferry Landing project. First, I would like to thank the Port of San Francisco and their staff for the continued partnership and collaboration on this very important milestone. Today, we welcome Port staff on our Zoom, Simon Betzelel, Boris Delapine, and Jamie Hurley. The Port Commission approved the MOU this past Tuesday in a unanimous decision to approve. I'm going to give an overview on the project history, the design, and next steps for project delivery. Mike will give some more specifics on the workings of the MOU. So, Jim, as you mentioned, this has been a long time in the making. The terminal and service are identified in Plan Bay Area, and WETA's 2050 service vision is also in WETA's strategic plan. The project was on track for delivery in 2019 and was delayed due to increased cost of construction. So the project was basically put on hold at that time. In 2020, we were close to being ready to deliver the project, and the pandemic struck. And that changed the entire financing picture and resulted in even greater construction costs. In response, WETA and the Port developed an ad hoc subcommittee to seek out new funding sources. In the spring of 2024, WETA collaborated with the Port and SFPUC on an EPA Clean Ports grant for Mission Bay Ferry Landing and downtown San Francisco electrification project. That grant was awarded to the Port in the fall of 2024, and it closed the remaining funding gap that existed for Mission Bay Ferry Landing.
The project site is located at Terrier Francois Boulevard and 16th Street. It is in between Aqua Vista Park and Bayfront Park. Bayfront Park was recently completed by the Port of San Francisco, and this site is also immediately adjacent to the Chase Center. Mission Bay neighborhood is rapidly evolving with investments made by the Port of San Francisco, City of San Francisco MTA, and others in the community, including UCSF and the Golden State Warriors. Mission Bay is one of the fastest growing neighborhoods in San Francisco. This project is a very important final component of infrastructure, the second major destination terminal in San Francisco for WETA, San Francisco Bay Ferry, and offers many transfer opportunities connecting Mission Bay to the greater Bay Area region. The terminal itself is very similar to facilities within the WETA system, consisting of a fixed pier, gangway, and passenger float. The terminal will be electrified with a universal charging float and vessel charging capabilities from day one. All the terminal components are identified in the MOU along with costs, funding responsibilities, construction, and operation responsibilities. Here's a simulation of the project as it was planned for and designed in 2019. In the months leading up to the EPA grant submission, WETA and the Port partnered on a process to identify opportunities for construction cost savings. We also coordinated with the Port's engineering consultant, Cowie, on that effort. The biggest opportunity that was identified for cost reduction was to eliminate the canopy on the gangway and the passenger float. This resulted in a reduction of several $1 million, and it also saves on future operating costs due to the costs and challenges associated with maintaining such canopies, as we know at the downtown terminal. Next steps for delivery include major efforts from the Port to update design, addressing the canopy change and incorporating the charging and electrical infrastructure. The Port dredged the terminal area in 2021. The Port will soon be following up on that work with an RFP in the next few months for what is known as phase 2A, which is a cap or a mattress that goes over that dredged area. And it's really to protect the sediment that was exposed in that dredging process. So that will be underway in the next few months with completion by the end of 2025. The Port expects construction contract advertisement in the fourth quarter of 2025, and the construction is scheduled to be completed by the end of 2026 with operations beginning in early 2027. I'll turn it over to Mike to give you specifics on the MOU.
Great. So we did a brief update last board meeting on some of the basic business terms that we anticipated being in the MOU. Those by and large have carried forward into the draft that's before you today. So I want to highlight a few of those and certainly take any questions you have. But also first, just acknowledge the foresight on this project. We've got a shovel-ready project. I think we all would have liked to have been able to deliver it a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, the original funding fell through during the course of COVID. We worked very closely with the Port of San Francisco to find the Clean Ports opportunity, which represented the final piece of the funding of the project. But the fact that that project was shovel ready allowed us to go for that grant. And that's really a testament to the vision of the Port of San Francisco, and particularly under the former leadership of our director of Moyer now, but the Port's former director.
I'm so happy.
But this project, we're able to move forward on dropping our project into, like Chad mentioned, the hottest neighborhood in San Francisco. This is the price of real estate is far exceeding anywhere else in the city. There are new companies moving in. There's a buzz when you go down there. And so this project isn't just about moving people along the San Francisco waterfront from downtown San Francisco to Mission Bay. It's really about extending the entire regional transit system coming into downtown San Francisco. And so this is an extension of the services operated by WETA at all of our origin terminals coming into San Francisco. This allows people to transfer at our docks and continue on to Mission Bay, this area of high employment growth and demand. It's also an opportunity for Golden Gate riders. They're arriving at the same ferry terminal we arrive at. Their passengers can get out into the service. An opportunity for BART riders coming in from all over the region to walk across the Embarcadero, get into the future shuttle service connecting to the ferry building in Mission Bay, and Muni riders. Muni riders arriving on the downtown Muni Underground. Theoretically, if you're coming on a bus to the Transbay Terminal, it's a bit of a longer walk, but you can still make that connection.
The point being, this isn't just about a segment of a trip. This is about an extension of the regional transit network. So we're really excited to do it. Couple highlights, business terms to highlight that are in the MOU. The scope of the project has been adjusted since it was originally contemplated to account for the operation of electric ferry vessels. So this involves charging infrastructure on the floats, as well as connection to the local grid operated by the SFPUC. So those have been built in the design of the project and assumed in the cost budget that we are carrying forward for construction. The actual construction of the project, as originally contemplated, would be performed by the Port of San Francisco, with the exception of the universal charging float. That's a piece of infrastructure that WETA is currently in the process of requesting proposals to procure. Per terms of the agreement, that infrastructure would be provided us basically as an owner-furnished asset that would then be installed by the Port of San Francisco's construction contractor. So the rest of the work, the terminal construction, the connection to the power grid will be done under construction contract by the port.
That's awesome.
Key funding provisions, and maybe this kind of relates to the discussion on the last item concerning the preservation of WETA's limited RM3 money. This agreement clearly spells out what had previously been kind of a handshake expectation between the parties up until this point, that the contribution of RM3 money to the project will be limited to what has been currently agreed to, and that's $26 million. And the agreement is very explicit about that. The agreement also spells out should additional money be needed for the project due to potential cost overrun or current sources of funding potentially not materializing, and the Clean Ports Grant is a significant piece of the funding puzzle here. The agreement sets forth that it'll be the responsibility of both parties to work together to find future sources of funding if needed. In terms of post-construction responsibilities and roles, there'll be many more agreements that come forward. There'll be some funding agreements that come forward for the different grant sources. There'll also be a lease and license agreement coming forward that'll lay out the precise roles and responsibilities for both the port and the WETA for the finished facility. Like I mentioned last board meeting, these will largely follow the template that we have, the example that we have for the downtown San Francisco ferry terminal. So this would be a scenario where that access control gate where you pass through to board the ferry, that's the kind of point of demarcation between responsibilities. Everything waterside outboard of that, WETA's responsibility consistent with the model we have at several other terminals. Everything land side of that access control gate, Port of San Francisco's responsibility, including the electrical infrastructure required to operate the coming from the land side to operate the battery electric ferries. And then just one other item of note, and I'll open it for any questions you have. The parties did address the responsibility for dredging, namely the responsibility for funding future dredging. At this point, the parties agree that there is no secured source of funding should a future dredging episode be required, and they agree that similar to the provision whereby if additional funding is required, the parties are agreeing to kind of work collaboratively to secure that future funding for dredging if it's required. So with that, a draft agreement is attached to the staff report, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Appreciate the efforts you folks have put into this over a long period of time. It's certainly been a long time coming, and I don't think anyone would question the importance of this project. And I've said privately and publicly over the years, it's a game changer for the system. And it's a project that then enables us to do many other things and to be seen in a different way. And it's a great step forward for us. It's also it's certainly, I was over there last weekend, and you could just kind of feel the meaning it would have if that terminal were there. It's going to make things so much better for so many folks. There's no question about it, and you're correct to acknowledge that that area has become sort of the new San Francisco. It is it's where a lot of the stuff that's happening in town is really happening. and nobody's really complaining about lack of activity over there. So it's not a major element of the city's focus, like how do we get Mission Bay going? Hasn't been an issue. I'll say a couple of things. In looking at the financing of it, that 26 million, it sticks out. One agency that is, I think we've been fortunate to be treated well by the public, but we're not the biggest agency in the world, and we're not a deep-pocketed agency. And when we spend the money that we have, there's no money behind it. So it's not like there's more coming in. We then have to figure out, our future funding. So every dollar we spend of this kind of money, we have to recognize that there's no replacement source for it. It has to be found in the future. So I guess, the 2 points I would make would be, I think the city is getting off well on this one. I think the city of San Francisco, which is enjoying the tax base from Mission Bay, a great project, and all of the benefits that come out of Mission Bay and the jobs that are there and the activities that are taking place there. This is a great project for the price that they're paying. And unlike us, although they have, severe budget issues at the moment, their sources of funding are much deeper, and they have a lot more options. And, they don't actually run out of money. It gets replenished through those various sources. So I would say that. The other thing I would say is this is a classic example of something that shouldn't happen again. And what I mean by that is that we really need to, and this project is not alone, but this project should have been part of the development plan for that area from the beginning, from a financial perspective. And it should have been anticipated in the deal in Mission Bay that there would be need for ferry service, and that would add value overall to the projects that would come out of this, and the city as the as the overseer of those projects, and that we would therefore the folks who were investing in those projects, there should have been some set aside, whatever the form it would take. But there should have been whether it's a Mello-Roos district or whatever financing methodology was taken, we should never have had to wonder where the money was coming from for this. It should have been funded. And maybe the budget for it wouldn't have been high enough because we would have anticipated a lower amount that would have become a higher amount, but we'd be filling in rather than having to pay the whole amount. So there are other projects like this around the Bay, which are similar to this, where maybe there won't be a terminal because they weren't considered, and we're sort of too late in the game. But let this be a lesson in making sure that these local governments who have bayfront property understand that they have a responsibility in their permitting and their planning to include water transit as part of the mix of services that get provided for the future. And there's been some of those that have happened, and we appreciate where those actions have been taken. And but this particular project should just be a bold reminder to us that there's this should become the standard. It's going to require some education and maybe some forcefulness and so forth. But we're not the bank of WETA. We're the bank of Bay Ferry. We're just not. We have to assume things are going to be tighter in the future, and we may not have the availability of this level of capital from local sources in the future or soon. And so I don't think there's a shortage, in a world in which the waterfront is developing, and I hope we can move more and more toward that world for all the benefits that waterfront oriented development happens, there really isn't a shortage of funds available this is a fairly small piece of the pie. But if you don't think about it in advance and the deals get done, you can't go back later and say, gee, you missed this one, let's go back. There's never any going back. So that's what I offer. But I do appreciate the work that's gone into this. I think I think the Port of San Francisco provided terrific leadership, and there's a great series of partnerships here that make this happen. And I can't wait for the day we get to kind of break ground on the project, and the day where we get to partake of the first vessel coming in and going out. So thank you.
I was just going to add, and I agree with you. It should have been done more like Alameda did it, where they seaplane and work with the developer and stuff like that. So I thought I'd just point that out since we're sitting here.
Yeah, since we're in Alameda, it's good.
If you're getting your history. So the Mission Bay Plan was done in 1997, just as a reminder. So we've come a long way. We've waited a long time for Mission Bay to get where it is today. So raise your hand if WETA was in operation at this level in 1997. But be careful, guys. Come on. I resonate as someone who is always begging for money for the waterfront. I resonate with what you said, and I do want to say this is a fantastic example of what we need to do going south, or actually going away from the Central Bay. So whether that's east or whether that's south, I just want to commend you all for what happened here. I remember, I think it was 2010, 2011, when I met with the then Mayor Lee about this project, and he was very, very astounded when I told him it would take about 10 years. And I thought our biggest problem was going to be getting the entitlements, because we had to do CEQA and NEPA, which I thought was ridiculous. And unfortunately, that was a whole nother, that was the least of our problems as it turned out. So kudos to you. What many of you may or may not know, and I really want to commend all of you for, is this is an extraordinarily difficult part of the bay. It is extremely shallow, and it is trafficked. We've heard a lot of this conversation in other parts of the bay, whether that's Redwood City, whether that's Berkeley. We're going to hear it more as we go up the Strait. We're going to hear it more as we go down south. This is a great model, and I'm super excited that we've cracked this problem or the code here. Hopefully there are parts of it that can be replicated, maybe not take as long to move forward, but also to build that consensus for, maybe we had to have more constituents in the area before we got the legs, but I also really am gratified to see all of the different sources of funds that came from the land side. Because the fact of the matter is the cities have a lot of mouths to feed, whether they have a regenerating source or not. And there are a lot of restrictions on those. So kudos to everybody involved. I can't wait to be there. Sorry about the canopy though. Wow. Better than nothing.
And just to add to what Vice Chair Moyer just said, electrification. That has been added in just the past couple of years. And so that's a huge part as well. And we're here. We're here. We're doing this. And it's fantastic. So congratulations.
And so I just wanted to clarify, like our contributions are just going towards waterside improvements. Is that accurate to say?
They are not. They're because we strategically had to move some pieces of funding around to be competitive for the Clean Ports Grant. And so as a result, where we were initially going to have kind of channel our money into the part that we are going to be responsible for the water side, our money is getting split across various components of the project. Notably, we will be requesting an allocation of RM3 funds from MTC to proceed with the first part of construction, which will be the cap work. And there will be a sizable amount of RM3 in that component of the work. Aaron, did I get that right? Thank you.
Okay, and so, and then also Chair Wonderman's comments about involving the developers. It just reminds me that we need to engage other developers in the service region to make sure that as those developments are happening, we are also engaging with them. So just wanted to throw that out there. And then I've heard an idea thrown out a few times that I think is interesting about a Bay Area regional JPA focused on dredging. And so I don't know how we could perhaps look to advocate for that. I think it would be really great to have some sort of a JPA where we're looking at the funding coming in, doing a large permitting process that everybody can tie into so that we're all coordinated in those efforts. And I think that would be more effective, efficient, affordable, and better for the environment all at the same time. So if there's some way to do that, I would love to see that happen. Where'd your vice mayor in 1990?
No, I've been fired.
Quick additional question. Did you give us the forecasted or anticipated opening date?
Yes, terminal construction, early 2027.
Okay. And remind us of when we'll have the first 150 passenger ferries?
That is middle 2028. Early 2027, same timing.
Okay, so we're estimated now to have both the
Sorry, my numbers are
400
off.
passenger or two 400 passenger electric ferries in early 2027 plus all one
100.
in early by late 2026, early 2027. Okay, cool.
Okay, I think we've exhausted the board's initial comments. Let's take a motion if there's a motion to be had. Do we have a motion? A motion on Mission Bay. Am I allowed to move it? I'll make the motion.
Oh,
Is there a second?
second.
We have a motion and a second. Melanie, is anyone signed up to speak?
Nobody has signed up to speak.
Would anyone at this point from the public wish to comment on item number 8? Any further discussion from the board? Let's call the roll on item 8, Mission Bay.
Wonderman. Chair Wonderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director Del Bono,
Yes.
and Director Du.
Yes.
The item passes.
All right, congratulations. Terrific.
Yeah.
Well done. Item number 9, authorize the executive director to enter into a lease at 375 Beale Street and related actions.
Thank you, Chair Wonderman. I'll take this one. This meeting, like most of our meetings, is a good example of the increased scope that this agency has taken on. You know, from the work that we've done on the reorganization of the agency, that we've right-sized the staff to be able to handle that increased scope of work. The agency has grown a lot since we initially occupied the Pier 9 space in 2006. We know that we have the resources on board today to be able to deliver on the very large capital program that we have before us, to be able to operate the expanded service that's encompassed in our service vision. We're already doing more than we were doing before the pandemic. From a service standpoint, we have more vessels, and we've outgrown the space at Pier 9. We have 32 positions today. That's grown from 16 before the pandemic, and we've been making a lot of headway hiring folks. I think we have 2 vacant positions that will be filled in the next few months, and then we'll be fully staffed. And every time we post a job, the first question is, where's this person going to sit? Because we are out of space. So we've made Pier 9 work as long as we could. We've known for a while that we need expanded space, and the first thing that we did was to work with the port to explore options that are in their portfolio that might work for our purposes. And it includes not just workspaces for our growing team, but also the ability to meet as a team, the ability to occupy our office space all at one time, to encourage collaborative work among the team, and also something that's been on our list for quite some time, a board meeting space that we can use for our meetings on a monthly basis that is reliable and technically equipped with the audio and visual needs that we think we should have to be able to conduct board meetings in a professional manner. So we looked at a few spaces that the port had available. The roundhouse space was one that had potential. We actually took the next step there to do some design of what the space would look like if it were occupied by SF Bay Ferry staff, and if we outfitted it in the way that we would want to be able to achieve all of those goals. And it just ended up being a little bit too small for our purposes. And so we would have not been able to achieve all of the goals that we sought out, and we certainly wouldn't have any room to grow in the future. And we're looking at a potentially 10-year commitment here, so we want to make sure that we leave ourselves some flexibility. We talked to the port about expanding the search beyond the port's portfolio, and almost immediately became aware of the space at 375 Beale. This is, of course, a regional center for transit purposes. MTC is located at 375 Beale. Some other regional partners are located there. They had some private sector tenants that have vacated during the pandemic. And we began talking to them about a section of that building that would meet our needs. So the space at 375 Beale is 9,000 square feet compared to 5,500 at Pier 9. We would, on a per square foot basis, pay pretty much the same rate as we're paying at Pier 9. It's, of course, a little bit more expensive because it's larger, but it gives us everything that we've been looking for, enough space to accommodate staff in a comfortable manner, enough space to accommodate team meetings. Our team is currently divided on a temporary basis between 3 locations. We have 3 staff members that are at our Central Bay facility here in Alameda. And we've since last summer been talking about that as a temporary scenario until we can find a space that will accommodate our needs. We've moved staff into office spaces that used to be private office spaces. Now they accommodate 3 or 4 people. And it is certainly an arrangement that needs to be temporary in nature in order to, it's not sustainable in the long term. The Beale Street location gives us the room that we would need to accommodate the staff, room to grow. Also, we would have access to the board meeting space available at 375 Beale, reserved for us on a monthly basis at the time that we need it, available to us outside of those monthly board meetings to reserve for free and use for other purposes, stakeholder meetings, community meetings, et cetera. There's something to be said about being occupying the same building as our major funding partner in MTC. We are getting a very good rate at 375 Beale based on the timing of this change. This would be a 10-year lease, and we believe that it is the right direction after discussing with the Bay Area Headquarters Authority, which manages the building. That's a joint powers authority between MTC and BATA, the Bay Area Toll Authority. And we are looking for authorization from the board to proceed to the next step and enter into a lease with Baja.
Thank you. Appreciate as your neighbor that it's been getting tighter. And we know why. And that's, I think it's natural that a regional agency would want to be located with other regional agencies. And I think it's unquestionably a good fit and unquestionably a good timing on the market. And so the good time to move. But one quick question is on the port lease. How much time is left on that lease, and are we obligated to, to continue paying, or is the port willing to give us or is there a sublease opportunity, or how does that work?
We would need to terminate the lease with the port early. Right now, it's the end of 2026 is the termination date. So we would be terminating a year, approximately a year and a half, a little bit less than that early. We've discussed this with the port. We're in the middle of discussions with the port about this. They've had some internal discussions. They're due to come back to us next week with a proposal about how that would work. We've let them know that we would like to retain the berthing space on the apron at Pier 9. We wouldn't lease the apron space like we do today. That would be available for the next tenant at Pier 9. That's a non-exclusive access to the apron, so we would have the ability to access the berthing space across the apron in the future, just like somebody would today with a non-exclusive access. It's important for us to retain the berthing space because we use it as a key component of our emergency response capabilities. Also need to use it for operating purposes every now and then. So that's our proposal to the port, and we are waiting to see what they come back to us with on that suggestion.
And I imagine you've discussed this probably at some length with the staff. How do the staff feel about it?
I think staff is excited. Everybody will miss Pier 9 for sure. It's a great place to be. As a ferry operator, being right there on the water is ideal, as you know. And we wish we could make it work. We did look at renovating the space and trying to fit more workspaces into the constraints of Pier 9. It would be expensive and it wouldn't be ideal. There's really no way to make it work in a comfortable way. Pier 9 also requires other renovations despite the need for more headcount there. So they're, staying at Pier 9 carries a cost no matter what the headcount is. The team's aware of it. I think it does represent this agency graduating to the next level of sophistication as a public transit agency. Moving to this regional headquarters carries a lot of benefits. The staff recognizes that. We've been discussing it with the staff for quite some time, and so I believe there's buy-in from the team to make this happen.
Great, thank you. Directors?
You may have mentioned this. Timing, when do you think you will be moving?
We've proposed August 1st move-in.
Okay, great.
Okay, can we have a motion on this item?
So move.
Motion?
I'll second.
We have motion and second. Thank you. Are there members of the public wishing to comment on item number 9?
Nobody has signed up to speak.
Anyone from the public wish to speak on item 9? Any further questions or comments from the board? Please call the roll on this item.
Chair Wonderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director Del Bono,
Yes.
and Director Du.
Yes.
The item passes.
All right. Wish you well in your new home. I guess wish us well, because we'll be there too, right? Kind of, sort of. Item number 10, Oakland Alameda Water Shuttle Pilot Project Update.
Thanks, Chair Wonderman. Directors, Tom Hall, Director of Operations and Customer Experience. Again, I'll be co-presenting this with Gabe Chan from the planning team. Since we're in Alameda, we thought it appropriate to provide an update on probably the biggest pilot we've done so far, the Oakland Alameda Water Shuttle, which launched July 17th, 2024, and is still going. For those unfamiliar, this is a map showing both the route as well as the catchment area for potential users of the water shuttle. It connects about, I think it's 550 feet, something like that, but it's a critical pipeline. because otherwise you're going through a tunnel or making a long trek to a bridge. So it's a key pedestrian and bike connection for Jack London Square and Alameda Landing. There's good shopping and restaurants on both sides and a lot of residents on both sides. And we're finding new and exciting ways that people are using the water shuttle to improve their transit across the estuary. This is a free temporary service between those two locations. Currently operates 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. So it's a Wednesday through Sunday operation with an annual estimated operating cost of 1.5 to 2 million, completely funded through a combination of an ACTC grant and some other public and private sources, ACTC, Alameda County Transportation Commission. The City of Alameda and the Alameda Transportation Management Agency were really the leaders in getting this going, and we've been partnering with them closely around the launch and operation. The operation is managed through us by our contract operator, Blue and Gold Fleet. They operate the vessel. We have regular check-ins with the partners, including the city and the TMA, to update the schedules and check in on the operations and navigate the situation. It's been a very collaborative process between all of the parties. As I mentioned, we did launch on July 17th for a 2-year term. That was one of the 3 pilots we launched that month. And it's the one that has continued to go. And then in November, we were able to increase service. Obviously, with this being a new vessel, a brand new type of service for us to operate, there's a lot of uncertainty when we built the first schedule in coordination with the partners. We learned a lot in those first few months, including how long it takes to traverse, 600 feet across the estuary and how long it takes to load 32 passengers instead of our normal 300 to 400 passengers. And so we were able to make a schedule tweak in November to enhance service, tighten up those turnaround times, and tighten up the schedule overall to really add a lot more service. And then data in this report, which was compiled by Gabe, goes up through December 31st. Preliminary findings, just quick bullets. Ridership is pretty seasonal and variable with weather conditions. Going back to what we talked about with weather impacts on our broad Trans-Bay ferry ridership, it's even more impacted on this service because it's really meant for pedestrians and bikes. And so folks are ride much less on the rainy days. And we did see ridership drop off significantly during the winter. And it's starting to bump back up as the weather gets a little bit better. Ridership is bidirectional and it peaks on the weekends in the midday afternoon and PM commute time. So we are seeing folks in the mornings come from Oakland to Alameda and vice versa. Gabe will go through a couple of charts that show this, but the peaks really are on the weekends. Sunday has been the biggest day. The farmers market in Jack London Square, we think, is a big driver of that, getting people onto the water shuttle and over there. Service and vessel, the vessel has been primarily really reliable. There were a few hiccups that will be shown in the charts. Most of the hiccups are related to weather. And then the one consistent piece of feedback we get from passengers is that they want more service. So they want 6 or 7 days a week. They want fewer gaps where we have to do lunch breaks and fueling and that sort of thing. And so that's always a good problem to have. That's a problem we have on our existing Trans-Bay service. Is the only problem is they want more of it. And with that, I'll pass it off to Gabe to run through the charts.
Good afternoon, Board of Directors. So I'm going to walk through some of the data that we compiled through December 31st. So this one here, we're looking at total ridership by week. This is basically a count of all the riders we had since the beginning of the service. That first month where we see over 3,000 boardings weekly, that's probably due to a lot of the excitement that was generated around the launch of the service. And then since then, it's been a very consistent trip generator. We have a lot of people who are riding back and forth in both directions. And it's one of our strongest ridership routes when you're looking at the whole system overall. Seasonality is still an issue, right? We see the winter kind of dropping off, and as we continue to track the data, we're going to see how it comes back in the summer, if it does, and what that seasonality looks like. So we mentioned bike ridership and how it's a critical connection for people on bikes. We saw that borne out in the ridership data as well. We had about 10,500 bike boardings out of the over 50,000 boardings for the time period. That's about 20% of the total, and that's just at or above what we see on the rest of the system. One thing we do note about the bike riderships is that the share of bikes is higher on the weekdays versus the weekends. And that's also consistent with trends that we see in the rest of the system. So here we're looking at the Oakland-bound average riders per run by hour of the day. So this is people going in the Oakland direction from Alameda Landing, and we're seeing that generally it peaks pretty flat from about 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that's consistent with kind of all the ridership trends that we've been seeing with our weekend service on the rest of the Transbay routes as well. And then if we look at the Alameda bound direction, we see that it's a pretty similar distribution, but shifted maybe a little bit later in the day. And so this kind of tells us that people are maybe going to Alameda more in the afternoon, going to Oakland more in the morning. And this is also consistent with what we see on our regional routes on the weekends as well. So if we look at passengers on board by day of the week, we see here that Sunday's the big day, closely followed by Saturday, and then Friday, Wednesday, and Thursday. This is very much a kind of weekend choice rider, recreational rider route. And although people are asking for more Monday and Tuesday service, we see that the big draws are on the weekends. All right, and then cancellations. So we saw in the very first week of service, there was a mechanical issue that had to do with damage to the vessel. We missed about 1.5 days of service with that. But besides that, there were only 4 other weeks in the time period that we studied that had cancellations, and those were all due to weather. So as you see, the week of November 20th, we had that big storm, and then we had another storm week of December 11th. So some issues that we've kind of seen with the weather, the high tide and storm surge causes some issues with berthing at Oakland. And that's an issue that we've observed throughout the past 6 months. And there's, I guess, Tom, do you want to speak to how we're addressing that if we are?
Can you explain what the issue is?
So on the Oakland side, it was kind of a new issue. We're learning everything for the first time when these things happen. We had king tides one particular week that there was a storm coming in. This was the week of December 11th, I believe. Actually, I take that back. It was the week in November. And what we found is that it completely washed out the landing area on the Oakland side. With the way it's constructed, there's not really a good break there. It's more of a slope down to the water than a ledge. And so there was no safe way to get between Jack London Square and the gangway itself. So we suspended service. We're continuing to monitor that. We weren't sure, when that happened, if it was just due to the tides or just due to the storm surge. We've monitored it as we've had other tide events and other storms, and it hasn't happened again. So we're going to continue to watch it. The operations team is now plugged in on that. In terms of the other weather, it's obviously this is a very different boat than our other services and a very different profile. And so learning how, what wind will affect the vessel in terms of safe operations and landings on both sides has been a learning experience that the Blue and Gold team has done a great job of really monitoring. The modus operandi is to operate if safe. And so the captain knows what the vessel can do and what's safe to operate, and they call it off when we suspend, when it's unsafe to land and operate, and they bring it back as soon as they can safely do so. So we don't just shut down when it rains. We don't shut down when it's breezy. There are certain conditions that need to be met for us to suspend service. That's also been a big driver of our SMS and email alerts, are people relying on the Oakland Alameda Water Shuttle and wanting to get those updates. And then just to wrap up, so in terms of next steps, the city is initiating and conducting survey of both riders and non-riders. to really determine what more folks that are in the community want. Looks like I did need that slide. Thank you.
I think we've heard enough from you.
Yeah, I guess so. So we're coordinating with the city to get that questionnaire right, and so that we can really get some learnings from it, improve the service from there. And then we're going to continue to coordinate with the city on schedule optimization. There is a very minor change to the schedule coming in April, but we've committed to the city to have another potentially more robust schedule change in July based on what we learned from this survey and what we can do to increase service. And then, you know, Blue and Gold is doing a great job of ensuring high reliability of the vessel, to have no mechanical issues, take the vessel out of service since the first day of service is pretty impressive. We knew that this would be an issue with this service because there's only one boat that can do it. And there's no spare boats for this right now. So you have to keep that boat in good working condition, in Blue and Gold, and particularly Tony Heater at Blue and Gold has done a great job of maintaining that. And we continue to collaborate with the city on marketing efforts. Now that we get into drier weather and warmer weather, we're going to really be ramping up the marketing efforts with both Alameda TMA and the city. So with that, I did want to invite Brian McGuire from the City of Alameda's Transportation Department to provide a few comments from the city's perspective.
Good afternoon, Chair Wonderman and directors. My name is Brian McGuire. I'm a planner with the City of Alameda, one of the two main staff, excuse me, along with our project manager, Rochelle Wheeler, who I think was before you as we were getting ready for service, who's the project manager for this, who've worked on this big collaborative effort. I mean, it could not overestimate how complicated it is to do new transit service on the water, on public docks with different funding models, and really exciting experience. And the results have been, you know, what we really hoped for, and really solved what I think is unique here. It's a short distance, but it's for us because we don't have anything except those. If some of you came through the Webster or Posey Tube to get here today, any good way for those bikes and peds to connect to Oakland. And it's such a short distance, and this has really closed an infrastructure gap as much as a transit gap for us. So just really excited to work with, appreciate the WETA staff and the WETA board for the flexibility and creativity in solving these problems, and looking forward to you know, making it bigger and better and hopefully permanent in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions.
Right. Well, as I said at the onset, I love hanging around Jack London and watching them go back and forth. You know, this is the service we provide that you can kind of observe the whole experience. So it's fun to do. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, super excited about this one. So great to see it thriving. Looking forward to more of that this summer.
Okay.
Just a
go ahead.
quick, so I understand that this was a 6-month report, but since we're in March, I think it would have been great to have the data for the ridership data for January and February too, and any concerns, just for transparency, since we're talking about it. So if I'm looking at the ridership data for monthly ridership data, and it looks like we're on trend, nothing has changed drastically, or would you agree, or is there anything you want to point out for January, February while we are talking about this?
Yeah, very similar. Good point. We do track the ridership pretty closely, and we share with the partners a monthly report at the end of the month that not just has the day-to-day ridership, but a dashboard showing what the trend is, what the bike trend is, and everything. January and February were very similar to December.
Yeah.
So far in March, this past weekend was fantastic on the water shuttle. And so we're looking at it going up over the next couple of months, just like we would expect for our more recreational based ridership on the Transbay service.
Yeah, it's going to be super exciting to see what happens over the next 6 months, just as a comparison to the first 6 months. So fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the board? Anyone signed up to speak on this item, informational item?
No one has signed up to speak.
Anyone wish to from the public? Okay, thanks. Keep them coming across. Item number 11, April 2025 schedule change.
Great, me again. I'll keep this relatively brief. We did do a pretty thorough staff report, which we typically don't do with schedule changes because schedule changes are typically pretty minor in nature. Frankly, this one is too for most passengers. Most passengers will not see any negative impacts from this schedule change, but I did just want to go over 5 quick bullet points about the schedule change that we've put together. I do want to acknowledge that it's a very collaborative process to put together a schedule. This is not like a bus service or a train service where you put in one time and the rest of the times sort themselves. The way we do our schedule that's gone back a number of years with staff that are currently here and staff that have left is to really maximize efficiency of our vessels. We're vessel limited and we're crew limited. And so anything we can do to squeeze more service out of those, even if it means taking a vessel that started its day doing the Oakland route and moving it to Seaplane or Richmond, anything we can do to maximize that service, we do. And so that's a real collaborative process between my team, the planners led by Mike Gowerty, and Blue and Gold Fleet, who has to turn this all into crew bids and go get the labor to do it. And it's a big puzzle. It's kind of exciting to work on every time until we get frustrated. We get to a point where it becomes a little too hard to unravel, and then we give it a few hours and we figure it out. So a lot of exciting stuff in this schedule change. The first one I wanted to highlight is enhanced Richmond weekend service. So we brought back Richmond weekend service in July 2021, really for the first time. Prior to the pandemic, it had a brief 2-month pilot period that we didn't learn a lot out of, frankly. And so as a part of the pandemic recovery program, we did bring back full-time Richmond weekend service. It's underperformed compared to Vallejo and Oakland and Alameda weekend service. There's some great data in the staff report. Dory Funaki from the planning department really led that analysis, and we used it to inform the schedule changes. Our theory of the case is that the Richmond weekend schedule is not very good. And part of it is because we have those crews doing Pier 41 service. And so we wanted to see what it would look like to really invest those crews to do Richmond weekend service full time. And so you'll see in the staff report that we've really enhanced the Richmond weekend schedule, going from 5 trips in each direction to 7, and critically 3 peak direction trips in the morning and early afternoon. That's really when people on the weekends travel to San Francisco, is anytime between about 9 a.m. and 12:30, 1 o'clock. And we've added 50% more trips by going from 2 trips to 3. And so we think that'll help, in addition to covering more in the afternoon coming back, because different folks want to stay in the city different amounts of times. So we're going to run that for 6 months through November and see what happens, and come back to you with some results from that, and make some determinations and seek your guidance from there. The second piece of it is also related to Richmond, and this is the Richmond ballpark pilot, which we vetted with the pilot subcommittee last week. And this is essentially very similar to the Redwood City ballpark pilot from last year, where we're taking a service that doesn't currently have ballpark service and testing it out on some select San Francisco Giants games. The difference here is that we have a terminal in Richmond. We know what we're getting into utilizing that terminal and running service in and out of Richmond. Redwood City was a different kettle of fish. It was a terminal that we didn't build or operate. And so we really had a lot of factors we had to contend with in getting that going. It'll be much more simple this time, and we'll really be able to both test the demand for service to Oracle Park from Richmond and from Western Contra Costa County more broadly. And we'll also, we think there's some real mutual benefit here between the enhanced Richmond weekend schedule and the ballpark service. We should be able to get good media coverage, good engagement online for both of those, and that'll just build each other up. We'll also continue to partner with the Contra Costa Transportation Authority on the promotional funding that they've made available to us that we used for the Free Ferry Friday promotion. We'll leverage some of that additional funding to help promote both of these programs going into the spring. Earlier, I mentioned on-time performance in Oakland and Alameda. We saw suffer a little bit over the last couple of months. We have made some changes to address that, as I mentioned. That will impact a few commute trips on the Oakland route. So for any interested parties who ride the Oakland commute route, the 3:15 p.m. trip will become a 3:30 p.m. trip. We think that's a little bit better for most commuters. And then the next two trips will also adjust 5 to 10 minutes just to make sure we can stay on time more reliably. We're also closing a pernicious gap that we've had in the Alameda Seaplane weekday schedule in the afternoon. We've had a gap between 1 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. in both directions, which frankly is not a great time to have a gap when people are working more flexible schedules and more half days and taking meetings at different times of day. So we are able to close that. We did remove one midday Oakland trip that wasn't particularly well spaced and shifted that boat over to Seaplane. We're able to add 2 trips in one direction and 1 trip in the other direction to really close that gap. And we think that'll be a big benefit for our Alameda Seaplane riders. And then finally, in terms of our sports service, so we took a huge step today for the permanent Mission Bay ferry landing. We do run service to Chase Center currently out of Pier 48, which is about a 12 to 15-minute walk from Chase Center. We have a new team starting at Chase Center coming up in 2 months, the Golden State Valkyries of the WNBA. And we wanted to find a way to serve them without negatively impacting the rest of our service. And so we worked closely with Blue and Gold, the Giants, and the Valkyries to establish that service. So we will be providing pre and post game service for every home Valkyries game this season out of Pier 48. We will be there are 4 weeknight conflicts with the Giants that we worked with the Giants to find a solution to get fans to those games via ferry. There will still be direct service post-game back to Alameda and Oakland from Oracle Park. Pre-game service will be to Pier 48, which is a little bit more of a walk across the bridge, but it's a pleasant walk and we get you there early enough to get to your seats in time for the first pitch. We'll be providing the same service that we have in the past for Vallejo, for Oracle Park, for Giants games, and on weekends we'll be providing service to and from Vallejo, Oakland, and Alameda, as well as on 6 dates that Richmond ballpark pilot service as well. With that, happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, this is an informational item.
Thank you. Any questions, comments on the schedule? Anyone signed up to discuss the schedule change from the public?
No one had signed up to speak.
Any member of the public wish to comment on item number 11? Okay, thank you. Appreciate the work you put into that. Item 12, updated and restated SF Bay Ferry Administrative Code.
I think I'm going to present that, directors. Good afternoon. Yep, there it is. In a packed meeting, impactful meeting, I'll try to be brief. This item represents a lot of work by a lot of people, depending on the board's wishes. It is either an informational item to present you a draft of an updated and restated SF Bay Ferry Administrative Code, take comments, questions, discussions, and direction to bring back at a future item. But we invite you to be as excited as we all are and approve it today, if or take action on it one form or another today, if that's what you so wish. You have that flexibility.
So we have that flexibility to have an item be either informational or action, depending upon how we feel?
Correct.
Is that in the code of conduct?
The agenda.
Very good. Thank you.
So, although this represents a lot of work, and there are a lot of people, myself leading the way, that are very excited about what this represents for the agency, it doesn't, in my view, represent a whole lot of substantive and substantial changes from a board policy perspective. It's mostly a reorganization and updating of one of SF Bay Ferry's most important foundational guiding documents. So why a new code? The current form of the administrative code was adopted in the early 2000s. And while it's still very functional, it is 20 years old and is out of date in many respects and doesn't serve the organization well, both as to the structure and the organization, and in some respects, the contents. WETA is just no longer a small planning agency with a few employees. It's a big transit operator, fully fledged, as Seamus mentioned, graduated to our new offices, and it has a robust capital program and deserves an admin code that serves it well. here are just a few of the myriad examples of out-of-date provisions in the current administrative code that illustrate how it was created at a time when WETA was very different than it is now. It calls for a technical advisory committee because WETA had no technical in-house capacity. A whole lot of procurement procedural requirements that the board controlled that I just don't make sense anymore, or in some cases don't meet regulatory requirements. And that procurement aspect of this is sort of a theme of this new updated and restated code. And at first we thought about trying to just do a red line and do a few tweaks around the edges, but I think it quickly became clear that we wanted to take an opportunity to really rethink and achieve sort of the fundamental purposes from the board's perspective, in particular, of what an admin code for an agency like WETA ought to be. And so a red line just didn't work. We are proposing instead really a pretty complete restatement. And we believe that this new restatement should follow a series of just general principles. First, a thematic, consistent approach to this new code is that the board controls and sets policies, but then it authorizes and empowers its executive director to develop and maintain procedures outside of the administrative code that implement those board policies. I think any good administrative code should describe the duties and powers of board members and WETA officials, and should describe with flexibility how a board meeting, what your desired conduct and structure of board meetings. And then we think it's prudent for the future of WETA, as well as consistent with every other admin code and every best practice that we're all aware of, to include some common sense code of conduct to guide directors. And I said I was going to talk about procurement. So I want to focus in a little bit on the procurement piece, the contracts and procurement piece. This new administrative code does not include the processes that are in the current code. Rather, it focuses on the fundamental goals from a policy level of a procurement policy for an agency of this sort, which is to promote economy and efficiency, to ensure a high quality system, a procurement process of great integrity, so that we have great public confidence in WETA's procurement rules and procedures, and to ensure a fair and level playing field for everybody to compete for contracts with WETA, and to maximize competition when spending public funds. And then, of course, and not last, but certainly not least, to comply with federal, state, and other requirements, regulations, and laws. And so what you see on the screen now is the policy that is embedded in the proposed updated and restated code. And what the code then does is empower your executive director to implement and maintain a standalone contracting and procurement procedures manual to implement these policies. And a copy of the first state-of-the-art procurement procedures manual is also included in your board packet as a separate standalone document. I just want to highlight, and the screen does highlight one change in that manual and in the policy, and that does represent a change from the current practices, is that we're recommending that you authorize an increase to the executive director's contract authority from the current $100,000 to a new level of $250,000. That amount, $250,000, will be consistent with the FTA's threshold for small procurements, below which the FTA encourages and allows a more flexible and informal procurement process. That $250,000 will put the executive director's procurement authority, right now it is the smallest amount of any. This will now be like the second or third smallest of any that I'm aware of around the state, not just in the Bay Area. It's certainly not at the top of the list, but it's much more in the norm of what executive directors have. And perhaps most important, it will allow the executive director to issue contracts in that sort of mid-range below $250,000 in a way and at a time that matches the WETA's needs from an operational perspective and does not have to time the award of contracts around once a month board meetings. For instance, on today's board meeting in your consent calendar, you authorized a vessel maintenance contract for $150,000 that would be within the executive director's authority under the proposed updated and restated code, which would have allowed your executive director to award that contract at the time it was needed for the operational and maintenance purposes and not have to wait for the once a month board meeting as was the case today. I hope my excitement about this has been communicated. I think it's a great step for the agency and I hope you'll support it, but I'm happy to get as much into the weeds and answer any questions you may have and take direction as you see fit.
Yeah, thank you. I read through it and it makes sense. And I think almost 25 years is probably a fair amount of time when you should look to update these kinds of things. And you realize that you're operating on rules that are, long been, put to rest circumstantially. There is a section on travel policy that's kind of covered fairly extensively, which I would just point to my fellow directors. And if I read it correctly, it imbues the chair with the authority to approve travel for his fellow directors. So currently, I find out that you traveled later than after you did it. If I'm correct, I guess I'm asking a question. According to this, and when Seamus is traveling, he sends me a form, or WETA sends me a form for approval with a budget and so forth. What I'm reading is that would apply to the directors as well. Is that correct?
Essentially, that is correct. There is state law regarding approval of director travel, which requires the board to establish the procedures for what kind of travel requires pre-approval and what does not. And there was some discussion as to who should provide that pre-approval. Some agencies require board members to bring every travel concept to the full board for full board approval. I think this draft tries to streamline that and provide the executive director with that authority. To provide the board president with that authority. And then for efficiencies, but not as a matter of law, this policy applies the rules for board members to Seamus as well. So he also needs to get pre-approval from you for his travel.
Okay. Do any members of the board have, I'm not looking for additional work. However, I think, that travel is where you sometimes get in trouble. It's all fine until it's not. So I'm fine having the chair or any future chair having that responsibility, but I just want to ask the question.
I have no concerns with that approach. I do have a couple of other questions.
Okay. So go ahead, please.
This is fantastic. First question is, did you use any other administrative codes as inspiration? And if so, which ones rose to the top?
Sure. So we wanted to be able to tell you that this was, following best practices. So we've reviewed and are cognizant of many.
Mm-hmm.
As far as which ones rose to the top, this is a really good one. There aren't many that are as up to date and recent.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that I can call out one of your fellow transit agencies as yours is the best. This
is rising to the top. That's awesome.
We took the best from, I could tell you in different areas,
Mm-hmm.
Caltrain has a great area on this, and Samtrans is on that, and LAFTA on this, and Golden Gate on, but I don't know that I could tell you that there's one that we thought was the leader of the pack.
Yeah, well, that's
Except
fantastic. Let's make
Hopefully
this
now
one the
everybody
re-
else will answer that question by saying WETA's is the leader of the pack.
Fantastic. And then just a quick question regarding the $250,000 limit. You said that this is still low for California transit agencies?
Yes, I have, and we thought about whether to share this with you, but I don't know that I can pull it up on the screen, but I can certainly answer you right now. I'm sorry, I'm hunting in my, here's the document. I'm going to pull it. If you give me half a second, I'm going to pull it up on my screen.
No
I think the
rush.
range that we found is from 100,000 to 500,000. And if you have a question about a specific transit agency in about 3 seconds, yeah. So here we have Samtrans is $250,000. Golden Gate is $250,000. Santa Cruz Metro is $200,000. Metrolink, the commuter rail operator in Southern California, is $500,000. San Joaquin Regional Transit District is $150,000. WETA is alone with Triple CTA County Connection at $100,000.
Okay. So with those other agencies that have a higher amount, are they much larger in budget, in overall total budget, annual budget?
I don't know that I know the answer to that question. Santa Cruz Metro, I just don't know.
Okay. Does anyone have any concerns with 250,000? Do we want to consider like a higher amount, or?
I think the increase from 100 to 250 is substantial.
Yeah.
And I think it's also reasonable. And, you know, it sounds like it's fairly standard and defensible. And, you know, we want to give the executive director the flexibility to do things he currently now has to come to us to do, but we don't want to go so far as to have, you know, I'm always moved by a management theory called criterion of regret. So I think that's about in the ballpark.
I will say that the number of contracts that would be affected by this is really quite small. There's not you know, the big capital projects are going to be before you because they're over with the threshold, whatever that number would be. So we're just talking the 100 to 250,000 is going to impact, based on the sort of analysis we did, smallish contracts, mostly small vessel maintenance contracts, a few professional services, consulting agreements. You know, so if that provides you with any comfort.
Do we, if, what am I trying to say here? If FTA were to raise their limit from 250 to say 300, and San Francisco Bay Ferry would want to do the same, then the admin code would have to come back to. So my question to the board is then, are we interested in putting in, you know, if FTA raises the rate or the limit, that we would be doing the same, or are we fine with having it come back to the board?
I'm personally fine with it coming back to the board.
As well.
Okay.
Are there other questions? 'Cause
No, that's it.
I think
Yeah.
I'd like to get a motion. You know, first of all, great job. I enjoyed reading it and the thinking that goes into it. And it's, you know, it seems to me like rather than bring it back another time, we should act on it
Yeah.
today and keep the
That's-
business going forward. So does somebody want to make a motion?
I make the move. I think
Director
that's
Albo makes a
fantastic work.
motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Director Du, is there a second? And
I'm just gonna vote.
any further conversation, comments from the board? Members of the public on item 12, anyone signed up to comment?
No one signed up to speak.
Anyone wish to comment on item 12? Okay, let's call, thank you again. Let's call the roll.
Chair Wonderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director Del Bono,
Yes.
and Director Du.
Yes.
The item passes.
All right. I urge you all to read and memorize the board code of conduct. Very good. Let's go to the final item is public comments for non-agenda items. Has anyone signed up to speak on an item not appearing on today's agenda?
No one has signed up to speak.
Does anyone wish to make any comments? We're running out of time. Okay, well, again, thank our friends from Nichols Brothers for, this was a very big day, and I think we accomplished a lot today, and just want to thank you all for your service, and let's go SF Bay Ferry. The meeting is officially adjourned.